morning. Isn't it beautiful outside? Wow. I just want to first take this opportunity to thank you for coming. When you saw the snow, you didn't give up on us. That you said, I'm getting ready and I'm going. So I want to thank you so much for caring enough about this issue and about SIUE to come here today. So I am very excited to have you. I think you will have a wonderful educational day. The conference is Black Lives Matter Inside the Movement. It really is an opportunity for us as a campus, as a community, as a region, those of you who are here from other places, to really have a conversation about what is the Black Lives Matter movement? How does it relate to the region? How does it relate to SIUE? What can we do to really get a clear understanding of the movement? So I think today would be an opportunity for that. Our chancellor is going to come up and he'll give a formal welcome to all of you and to our president who's in the house. President Dunn, would you please stand? And he'll give a formal welcome to the rest of you. I think today you will find that you will get a good understanding of what is the Black Lives Matter movement. How did it get started? How does it relate to the region? How does it relate to SIUE? And I think our keynote today will link the Black Lives Matter movement to history. And I think you'll get the historical context and why history is so important. So I'm so glad to see so many people here to really get a good understanding, because at SIUE, all lives matter. But Black lives matter too. And you'll get an understanding of what that means. So you will have an opportunity to hear from our students. We have a student panel. Then we have a faculty, staff, and community panel. So you'll get a chance to hear from them. And then our own Dr. Anthony Cheeseborough will come in and bring a closure of where do we go from here. And then we have our a student theater major, junior, who will give us a spoken word to really kind of put it all together. So again, thank you so much for coming. At the end of the conference, if you would like a t-shirt, you would need to do the evaluation, drop it off at the table, and you're welcome to have a t-shirt. All right, thank you so much. And now we'll hear from our Chancellor, Steve Hansen.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you for putting on this conference. This is an important time for the university and for our community of students and faculty and staff. And on behalf of the faculty and students and staff, I want to welcome all of you to Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville. Thank you for coming out today. Just up to a couple of minutes ago, I was continually revising my speech, and I realized I have two different speeches. And so if I stumble through this a little bit, I want you to give me a little degrees of freedom and, more importantly, forgiveness. Let me begin by remembering what W.E.B. Du Bois wrote in The Souls of Black Folks in 1903. He identified two themes that characterized American life in the beginning of the 20th century. Du Bois wrote that a black person, quote, one ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one black body. One aspect of this tension in the two-ness that Du Bois talked about is identity. Self-identity, self-definition, versus how you are defined by the majority as an other, as an outsider. A second aspect of the two-ness for African Americans is place. Where do we fit in? Are you excluded, included, separated, integrated? How much identity, self-identity are you allowed? How much self-identity can you have before you lose your sense of group? before you become excluded by the majority. Ta-Nehisi Coates expressed similar tensions and similar concerns in his very searing and personal and passionate Between the World and Me. Coates wrote, quote, "You exist, you matter, you have value. This is your country, this is your world, this is your body, and you must find some way to live within the all of it." Our conference today on Black Lives Matter is an expression of many of these same tensions and struggles that are articulated by Du Bois and by Coates. How are you going to live in this society? How are you going to make your way in this world? But the conference that Professor Brown and our students and faculty have put together is more than that. It's also a way to educate. It's a way to educate the white majority about the shapes, the forms, the disguises of racism, to educate us about the consequences of racism, to educate us about how our white privilege masks and disguises injustice. And this conference is also to educate the white majority about what Martin Luther King said, that, quote, "Peace is not the absence of tension. Peace is the presence of justice." Now, this conference also is to educate our African American brothers and sisters about the tools and language that are needed to combat racism, about how you live in this world, how you manage your two-ness, and how others before you have struggled and made for a better world. Education is to make us think. It's to challenge pre-existing ideas. In other words, education is to make us uncomfortable. And I hope that this conference today makes us uncomfortable in a lot of different ways. Make us think about how to survive in this world, how to make it more safe, more just, so that in the end, we can all thrive. Remember Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail in which he said, quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects others." So let me suggest as we move ahead that we try and think about how we're surviving in this world, and let's try and avoid some emotional traps that we might run into, and intellectual traps. For the white majority, we must avoid the fact of denial. When we say, "I am not a racist, therefore I'm not responsible." Such denial makes it impossible to move ahead, makes it impossible for us to understand, makes it possible for us to forget 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, and what historian Charles Lumpkin called the pogroms against African Americans in this country, the organized violence, whether it was the lynchings of the 1880s, the 1920s, the 1930s, the imprisonment of African Americans since desegregation, or the killings since the election of our first African American president, the killings of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Eric Harris, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, and countless others. We also want to avoid the trap of feeling that white privilege not only hides history, but also for somehow it says that we, the whites, become victims. We become victims of reverse discrimination, that our privilege has been taken away. And we want to avoid the trap of dismissing the Black Lives Matter by saying, well, all lives matter. Well, certainly all lives matter, but we don't want to diminish the importance of the unique issue that faces our African American brothers and sisters. So how do we move forward? Well, Ta-Nehisi Coates was a very searing book that doesn't leave a lot of direction forward. But I hope that this conference on Black Lives Matter helps us find a way forward, that leaves us with a path forward so that we can make a better world. And my expectation is that this conference will do so, and that as we move forward, we must think about what Nelson Mandela said. What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead.
Thank you, Dr. Hanson. Let's give Steve another round of applause. I also want to remind you on each speaker to hold on to something that each speaker gives you, because that's going to lead you to leave here with something to think about. I would now like to introduce Dr. Jessica Harris. Her short bio is in the program, but she's assistant professor in the Department of Historical Studies here at SIUE. She has earned her bachelor's degree in history from Dillard University in New Orleans, Louisiana, and completed her graduate work at Cornell University in New York. Dr. Harris specializes in 20th century African American history with a particular interest in the long Black freedom struggle and the contributions of Black women. Dr. Harris.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Chancellor Steve Hanson and Associate Chancellor Vanessa Brown for this opportunity and invitation. It's much appreciated. And I want to thank all of you for making your way on these treacherous roads out here to be with us this morning. In fact, my commute was 1 hour and 15 minutes, but I'm glad I had enough time to get here and take a deep breath before I plunge in. Just to kind of set the parameters for my talk, we can't really reflect upon what our roles will be as part of this movement and the broader, very arduous process of trying to address and resolve what continue as very dire issues if we don't know or allow ourselves to grapple with the issues being put forth by the movement. So my goal in this brief time that we have this morning is to simply to try and provide a framework for understanding what Black Lives Matter actually really means, and to give it some historical context and footing. So to begin my talk, I want to draw your attention to the year 1965. On August 6th, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law. In signing the measure, the president announced that, quote, "Today is a triumph for freedom as huge as any victory that's ever been won on any battlefield. Today we strike away the last major shackle of fierce and ancient bonds." Perhaps President Johnson spoke too soon. Just 5 days later, on August 11th, 1965, in stark contrast to the jubilation of the previous week, the Black community of Watts in Los Angeles exploded in fire and frustration. The immediate catalyst for the Watts riot was the arrest of Black motorist Marquette Fry and reports of police brutality. The six-day riot resulted in 34 deaths, 1,000 injuries, and close to $40 million in property damage. In its aftermath, a number of civil rights activists toured Watts, most notably the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. As Dr. King and his entourage walked the neighborhood streets, they had a memorable exchange with a young resident. "We won," the youth yelled. "How have you won?" Dr. King asked. "Homes have been destroyed. Negroes are lying dead in the streets. The stores from which you buy food and clothes are destroyed, and people are bringing you relief." "We won," the youth responded, "because we made the whole world pay attention to us." The youth's words to Dr. King that day spoke volumes about the invisibility and devaluation that he and other Watts residents had felt and experienced for far too long. Too many times, the local citizens of Watts were treated with excessive force by the police department, while white employers had repeatedly turned them down for jobs. They were troubled by overcrowded living conditions, and they were weary of being ignored by elected officials. As another Watts resident said in the midst of the riot, "We scream, but we can't be heard. We talk, but we can't be heard. It just seems like people don't understand. Respect and dignity is all we're fighting for." In 1967, while delivering a speech at Stanford University. Dr. King reflectively and astutely referred to the riot in Watts and the countless other uprisings that had enveloped urban America between 1965 and 1967 as the language of the unheard. It was his assessment that, quote, the nation's summers of riots had been caused by the nation's winters of delay. The result of America's refusal to hear that the promises of freedom had gone unmet. And as long as America postponed justice, he concluded, it stood in the position of having these recurrences over and over and over again. And prophetically, almost 50 years to the day the Watts uprising began, protesters took to the streets of Ferguson, Missouri. Under the slogan, Black Lives Matter, what began as local demands for an end to systematic police brutality toward African Americans has since been transformed into a potent national protest movement propelled by other high-profile deaths of unarmed African Americans at the hands of the police. The direct origins of the Black Lives Matter movement, however, preceded the protest in Ferguson. Black Lives Matter was first launched in 2012 as a chapter-based national organization by 3 Black women, Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi, following the murder of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin, and gained traction with the subsequent acquittal of his murderer, George Zimmerman. Yet Black Lives Matter is a unique intervention into the long Black freedom struggle that goes beyond extrajudicial killings of Black people by police and vigilantes. When we say Black Lives Matter, says co-founder Alicia Garza, we are broadening the conversation around state violence to include all of the ways in which Black people are intentionally left powerless at the hands of the state. She continues, when we say Black Lives Matter, we are talking about the ways in which Black people have been deprived of their basic human rights and dignity. It is an acknowledgement that Black poverty and genocide is state violence. It is an acknowledgement that over 1 million Black people are locked in cages in this country, 1/2 of all people in prisons or jails. That's an act of state violence. It is an acknowledgement that Black women continue to bear the burden of a relentless assault on their children and their families, and that assault is an act of state violence. Black, queer, and trans folks bearing a unique burden in a heteropatriarchal society that disposes them like garbage and simultaneously fetishizes and profits off of them is state violence. The fact that 500,000 Black people in the United States are undocumented immigrants and relegated to the shadows is state violence. The fact that Black folks living with disabilities and different abilities bear the burden of state-sponsored Darwinian experiments that attempt to squeeze them into boxes of normality defined by white supremacy is state violence. And the fact is that the lives of Black people, not all people, exist within these conditions is a consequence of state violence. Thus, the core mission of the Black Lives Matter movement is to draw our nation's attention to the myriad violations that persist against Black humanity and Black bodies. At the very least, activists have engaged some in and perhaps introduced others to what is a burgeoning conversation about structural racism. During her talk at the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate in September of last year, Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts gave a speech that bore the heart of the structural racism that activists have long known to be the sparks that necessitated the Black Lives Matter movement. Warren touched on many topics that are key to the everyday lived experiences of Black people in America, covering everything from housing discrimination to police violence to domestic terrorism to the gutting of voting rights. She says, quote, I speak today, she said, with the full knowledge that I have not personally experienced and can never truly understand the fear, the oppression, and the pain that confronts African Americans every day. But none of us can ignore what is happening in this country, not when our Black friends, family, neighbors literally fear dying in the streets. Listen to the brave, powerful voices of today's new generation of civil rights leaders. Incredible voices. Listen to them say, "If I die in police custody, know that I did not commit suicide." Watch them march through the streets, hands up, don't shoot, not to incite a riot, but to fight for their lives. To fight for their lives. This is the reality all of us must confront, as uncomfortable and ugly as that reality may be. Policing must become a truly community endeavor, not in just a few cities, but everywhere. Police forces should look like and come from the neighborhoods they serve. They should reach out to support and defend the community, working with people in neighborhoods before problems arise. All police forces, not just some, must be trained to de-escalate and to avoid the likelihood of violence. Body cameras can help us know what happens when someone is hurt. The first civil rights battles were hard fought, but they established that Black lives matter, that Black citizens matter, that Black families matter. Half a century later, we have made real progress, but we have not made enough progress. While it is clear that not enough progress has been made as it pertains to the effects of structural racism on Black lives, foregrounding the significance of Black lives in this historical moment still faces obvious difficulties and resistance. Among those resisting the slogan of Black Lives Matter are those who counter that all lives matter, assuming that African Americans in a supposedly post-racial America are no longer in need of specifically targeted policies that confront the persistence of racial injustices. As pointed out by philosopher and gender theorist Judith Butler, one reason the chant Black Lives Matter is so important is that it states the obvious, but the obvious has not yet been historically realized. So it is a statement of outrage. It is a demand for equality, for the right to live free of constraint. A chant that links the history of slavery, of debt peonage, segregation, and a prison system geared toward the containment, neutralization, and degradation of Black lives, but also a police system that more and more easily and often can take away a Black life in a flash, all because some officer perceives a threat. In fact, the point is not just that Black lives can be disposed of so easily, they are targeted and hunted by a police force that is becoming increasingly emboldened to wage its race war by every grand jury decision that ratifies the point of view of state violence. Justifying lethal violence in the name of self-defense is reserved for those who have a publicly recognized self to defend. But those whose lives are not considered to matter, whose lives are perceived as a threat to the life that embodies white privilege, can be destroyed in the name of that life. That can only happen when a recurrent and institutionalized form of racism has become a way of seeing, entering into the presentation of visual evidence to justify hateful and unjustified and heartbreaking murder. So it is not just that Black lives matter, though that must be said time and time again. It is also that stand your ground and racist killings are becoming increasingly normalized, which is why intelligent forms of collective outrage have become mandatory and obligatory. When we deploy All Lives Matter as to correct an intervention specifically created to address anti-Blackness, we lose the ways in which the state apparatus has built a program of repression mostly on the backs of African Americans. We perpetuate a level of white supremacist domination by reproducing a tired trope that we are all the same, rather than acknowledging that non-Black oppressed people in this country are both impacted by racism and domination and simultaneously benefit from anti-Black racism. When you drop Black from the equation of whose lives matter and then fail to acknowledge it came from somewhere, you further a legacy of erasing Black lives and Black contributions from movement legacy. And consider whether or not, when dropping the Black, we are intentionally or unintentionally erasing Black folks from the conversation or homogenizing very different experiences. In its articulation and goals, the Black Lives Matter movement is both reminiscent of and seeks to build upon the legacy of previous movements for Black liberation. Progressive movements in the United States have made some unfortunate errors when they push for unity at the expense of really understanding the concrete differences in context, experience, and oppression. Whether you agree or not, movement founders feel it appropriate and necessary to have a strategy and action centered around Blackness without other non-Black communities of color or white people, for that matter, needing to find a place and a way to center themselves within it. Just as the Black Power movement of the late 1960s supported Black self-determination, founders of the Black Lives Matter movement have defined it as being an unapologetically Black organization and movement. Yet beyond race, the movement attempts to center those that have been marginalized within previous strands of the Black freedom struggle. The Black Lives Matter movement attempts to adopt new organizational and leadership strategies that conform to current day insights, especially those that emphasize intersectionality or the interpenetration of race, gender, class, sexuality. Within that intersectional space, the emphasis has been on participatory democracy and group-centered leadership along the lines of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, founded in 1960 in Raleigh, North Carolina. Certainly, one of the formative influences of the Black Lives Matter movement and their group-centered leadership is Ella Baker, who was a key mentor to SNCC. Having worked for Dr. King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference with its male-dominated hierarchical structure, Baker wanted to break with, quote, the largely middle-class, male-centered leadership of the existing civil rights organizations in order to strip away the class-based and gender-based notion of who should and could give leadership to the movement and the Black community. Previously, according to Baker, you have the emergence of the individual as an articulate person, as one who could communicate between the masses to the, quote, establishment. This person or translator depoliticized because the articulate communicator, maintained Baker, was basically an accommodating leadership with a great overtone of personal advancement involved. For Baker, another type of leadership was no less strong and in fact was less assimilationist and co-opted, developed as an alternative to what she viewed as a, quote, egoistic caste of articulate communicators and negotiating elites. Prominent media recognized leadership, Baker argued, was never desirable given that news media created a cult of personality that fostered passivity. Baker stressed that revolutionary democratic power was communal and required direct mass action, and that progressive leadership was collective, identifying youth, women, and the poor as key figures in political leadership. This was her model for Black democratic struggles, a model embraced by some and rejected by others, and since embraced by those in the Black Lives Matter movement. Not only have some of the most vocal and respected members of this current cohort of organizers put forth a multifaceted critique of state violence, they have also recognized the many ways inequalities can exist within a movement and have made statements about the importance of female and LGBTQ leadership. As Black Lives Matter's founder Alicia Garza reiterates, it goes beyond the narrow nationalism that can be prevalent within Black communities, which merely call on Black people to love Black, live Black, and buy Black, keeping straight Black men in the front of the movement while our sisters, queer and trans and disabled folk take up roles in the background or not at all. This is an unapologetically intersectional analysis reflecting the work of Black women radicals and feminists like Ella Baker, but also like Sojourner Truth, Nannie Helen Burroughs, Angela Davis, Audre Lorde, Barbara Smith, Bell Hooks, Kimberly Crenshaw, Beverly Gottschalk, and so many others. Yet, equipped with a message and an organizational framework, many still question where the movement is headed. Can it be sustained? How will it continue to frame its goals? What kind of structures will house it? Over the course of the last 2 years, there have been numerous gatherings and meetings and conferences like this held across the country to explore these and other questions. What happens next? I would say that depends largely on the choices movement participants make going forward, as well as a number of external factors. How ruthless will the state be in suppressing protests? Will the mainstream civil rights leadership try to usurp the leadership of the movement? How much genuine and principled solidarity will Black Lives Matter receive from other progressive movements? Without challenging the right to autonomous leadership of local struggles or leadership by those most affected by racial capitalism and state violence, the larger left has to support, recognize, and embrace Black Lives Matter, not as secondary, but as central and potentially catalytic for a broad and far-reaching transformative agenda. This understanding must be linked to action. But more so, it's important that we work together to build and acknowledge the legacy of Black contributions to the struggle for human rights. One of the main contributions that we can all make to this movement is education. When the opportunity presents itself to talk with others about the Black Lives Matter movement, use the opportunity to talk about its inception and political framing. Lift up Black lives as an opportunity to connect struggles across race, class, gender, nationality, sexuality, and disability. And perhaps more importantly, when Black people cry out in defense of their lives, which are uniquely, systematically, and savagely targeted by the state, let's stand with them. Let's protest with them, affirming Black lives. Not just all lives, Black lives. Please don't change the conversation by talking about how your life matters. It does, but there is a need to focus on Black lives. Let's not water down the unity, let's not water down the conversation. I want to end with the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, Mississippi's wise and courageous grassroots freedom movement leader. When questioned by a reporter at the historic 1964 Democratic National Convention and asked if her powerful challenge on behalf of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party to the convention's acceptance of segregated delegations was her attempt to, quote, seek equality with the white man, she responded, "No. What would I look like fighting for equality with the white man? I don't want to go down that low. I want the true democracy that'll raise me up and the white man up, raise America up." Using somewhat different language, this was the message that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fervently sought to convey to this nation in 1967. It was the ultimate answer to the question posed by his last book, whose title was "Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community?" From here, we go to raise America up. That's where we go. So it comes to us to continue the fight, to make the necessary trouble, as John Lewis once said, until we can truly say that America, that this country, that every citizen has the enjoyment and conditions of freedom, and in fact, their lives matter. So my last word to you today is, let's raise America up. Thank you very much. Okay, so I have to switch gears here a little bit. I am moderating the student panel as well, and so just to kind of give you a little framework for what the students are about to do. Each one of them will give about 5 to 6 minute statements. Some of them may go over a little bit. And they're basically going to talk about what the Black Lives Matter movement means to each of them. Some of them are going to talk about, perhaps why the movement is so controversial. They will probably share with you conversations they've had with other young people, other students. And then they're going to talk about some of the fundamental principles of the movement as they see them, and perhaps how those principles relate to this campus and SIUE, and share what other general comments they may like to share. I will actually let them introduce themselves prior to giving their statements. So let's give our students a great round of applause.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Oh, thank you for saying good morning back to me. I wasn't expecting that. My name is Melvina Chaney, and I'm a senior here at the university studying psychology and criminal justice, and I'm excited to be here.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Gary Rashad Pritchett. I am a senior mass communication student here, and I'm excited to be here as well.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Veronica Delgado. I'm a graduate student here in the School of Art and Design.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Stacy. I'm a business major here at the university.
Morning, my name is Dylan Santoni, and I'm a senior political science major.
Good morning. My name is Ashley Dozier, and I'm a theater major, senior.
Good morning, I'm Diamante Batten Jackson. I'm a mass communications major, minoring in Black Studies, and I'm a junior here.
All right, I guess I'm gonna kick it off first. I just want to say good morning again and say that I'm honored to be a part of this conference. I would like to thank everyone that was involved with the planning and logistics, in particular Dr. Brown and Dr. Harris. Thank you for considering me for this panel. I want to begin my statement with a little bit of a story. It's not really a story, more of a conversation. I was talking to my older brother a little while back, and he was telling me that he dreads the day that he will have to have the talk with his son. And many people think maybe the talk is about stranger danger or the birds and the bees or whatever it may be. But my nephew is only 2 years old, so in that moment I had to disregard it. But I got curious a little later and asked him what he was referring to. He said, you know, the talk. The one where I have to tell him how to keep his hands visible around police officers or anyone with a gun. The one where I tell him not to play music too loud in public places. And the one where I remind him not to wear hoodies or play with toy guns. Unfortunately, in the Black community, the talk is becoming the normal. So I just challenge everybody in the room that has children to just sort of take a moment as I talk to reflect on having to sit down with your child and worrying about it at the age of 2, worrying about what the future holds for them. So just think about having to sit down with your child and have a conversation like that. The talk is one of the main reasons for me, Black Lives Matter is more than a hashtag or a phrase on a shirt. Black Lives Matter is a mindset and a movement that encourages blacks to view their lives as priceless and meaningful. In addition, I believe Black Lives Matter is an expansive movement that strives to bring awareness to many areas blacks have been oppressed, powerless, or overlooked. I also think that is the exact reason why it's so controversial and misinterpreted. We all know that all lives matter, but what's wrong with just focusing on the black ones? As stated earlier, the Black Lives Matter movement is expansive, and many people argue that the criminal justice system as a whole needs to be examined to make sure it is serving everyone equally without bias. I do agree with that statement, but I would add we need to evaluate the people running the criminal justice system and make sure at SIUE we are grooming unbiased criminal justice professionals. So if there's any faculty that we are, grooming them to not carry on biased ways of thinking. If we don't do that, we are perpetuating the cycle. And I just want to end by saying I believe SIUE has a lot of potential and is going in the right direction by having this conference, as well as having various conversations around campus about the needs of black students. Thank you.
I suppose it's my turn to speak. When preparing for this, I wasn't quite sure of where I should begin. I've never done anything quite this formal, so I just decided to start where it most felt comfortable. When I turn on my television to any channel at any time of the day, my expectations for seeing people like myself in roles or lights conducive to positive growth are drastically low. Beyond the latest systematic slang of yet another on CNN, or your favorite black athlete's highlight of the night on ESPN, our media landscape is short on figures that are, one, able to accurately represent the black culture in our modern society, or two, challenge the current stereotypes about both the black individual and the community. That's why Black Lives Matter. In my hometown of Chicago, where I was born and raised, for many years, my neighborhood was considered a food desert, meaning that there was no access to nutritional whole vegetables or fruit within a mile. I was fortunate to have a mother that was able and willing, with the drive to provide me the quality of life that allows me to be here today. But in a neighborhood where the average income per capita rests around $20,000 annually, not everybody is able to make it out for access. That's why Black Lives Matter. When I can attend a class centered around expanding one's cultural consciousness, taught by one of the handful of African American professors on our campus, and semester after semester I can recall the unwillingness by my peers to engage with the material, even to the point where I have professors that I see as personal mentors, being called out for teaching such enlightening material in our classes. That's why Black Lives Matter, because people don't want to connect. Fundamental to this movement, I feel that education is essential. You can't really judge a person when they don't want to accept who you are as a person, when they don't want to accept your culture and offer up a willingness to learn about you and your people. I'm unsure of where we can start on our campus, but I feel like a good place is to have more African American professors teaching more enlightening materials, and that's a good place for us to start. But beyond that, Black lives do matter, because they have never mattered to the extent that we have never felt included, and to the extent that we have never been properly represented.
Good morning, everybody. So my orientation to this movement is a little bit complex. So in my former life before graduate school, I have a bachelor's degree in women's gender and sexuality studies from Georgia State University. I'm from Atlanta originally. I moved here for graduate school. And my undergraduate career involved lots of organizing and activism and research, particularly around intersectional feminist topics of various things, reproductive justice, lots of stuff, really. So I moved here the same day that Michael Brown was killed, and that was a really interesting begin to my career here. And I live in St. Louis. I go to school here, obviously. And so this Black Lives Matter as a movement is important to me in so many ways, and I feel like pulls me in so many ways. Leaving my home in the South, I realized how pervasive all of these issues are all over the country. I feel like, at least my tendency in the South was to think that like this was a problem that the South had. I had never lived, outside of Atlanta until I moved here, so that was really interesting for me, and really, I think really alarming to realize what a problem this is everywhere, because that made the problem much bigger than what I thought it was. So the things that pull me in about this particular movement are the multiple intersections that it has. I'm a graduate student in the art therapy counseling department, and so particularly with this view of like mental health and the way that Black families are disproportionately affected in so many ways is something that I think about a lot. There are more Black foster children, just all of these things, and so thinking about how this movement is intersectional in accepting parents and accepting having children be involved, accepting you having your children around, things like that, I think it empowers Black parents, or I hope, that would be my hope that it does. And I feel like that's really important, because having the participation of everyone is really, really important. And, having like kids be around their parents, when their parents are advocating for themselves, is something that children learn too. And yeah, so that's kind of how I'm involved.
Bear with me because I've changed my beginning like 5 times. I'm from a small town called Lincoln, Illinois, and for the longest time, my family was the only black family there. So that was a struggle in itself. My brother, who is currently serving 5 years in the Arizona State Penitentiary, he said to me one day, "You need to be a thug like your brother." He said that to me some time ago. That always stayed with me because I don't want to be a thug like my brother since, where he's at now. But for the longest time, I got judged because of his actions, and he decided to adhere to the typical stereotypes of a black man. And I wanted to get away from that. We grew up in the same household. My mom worked 2 jobs, single parent. So the outcome was just definitely different. Until I was asked to sit on this panel, I was unaware that Black Lives Matter was an actual movement. So I was uneducated myself. When I did some research, what I got from it was that it's an organization and it's a good thing for the black community. In a world filled with black-on-black crime, Black Lives Matter shows unity within the race. One question that I have is what's wrong with having a black-based organization? What's wrong with securing safety for black individuals? I've been asked as a black girl why black people have certain organizations. My response usually is that I don't create those organizations. Also, these are organizations and clubs and establishments that there are organizations, clubs, and establishments that exclude African Americans, and it becomes a problem when the tables are turned. I don't understand that. My roommate, who is white, and we have race-related conversations all the time. One question that always comes back is why, as a white person, is she deemed a racist because of the things that other white people do? We have concluded that the media is the biggest enemy among races. All the posts on Facebook about how white kids get killed and there's no big uproar as if it was a black kid. Whose fault is that? It's all in the media, and that's what they want to show. As long as there's conflict between races, there's news, and that means high ratings. The media has created a stigma for black people that I don't adhere to. So I get questions all the time as to why do I talk this way, why do I act a certain way, but does it make me less black? In conclusion, Black Lives Matter is a movement that will give an entire race hope. Violence, whether it be black or white, is a problem. White killing white, black killing white killing black, or black killing black, it all has to stop. Everyone has a purpose. Everyone in this room right now matters. I am black, I am proud, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, good morning. Again, I would like to thank Dr. Brown and Dr. Harris for having me, and for all of you for coming on this beautiful day to the university. And just as Dr. Harris said, some of us will go over 6 minutes, and I will probably be that one. So just letting you know, so bear with me. So the discussion we have today is not about a right to vote or to get married or to own property. There is no law passed, there is no answer given or a tangible outcome that we can have for immediate relief for the question of systematic challenges. This is a tremendously slow process, slow enough that it's hard for us to even see or recognize the progress made. However, as enlightening as that might sound, we are far from the solution that we have yet to understand. We don't know what the outcome of this movement might be, but if we did, then we would go further to make it better. To make it better. Found me. Okay. 50 years ago, similar conversations required us to sit on our appropriate sides of the room and to trust the system. Today, we challenge that system as unfair and partial, unjust and imbalanced, unmerited and oppressive. For years, there was a divided country in regards to the access of basic rights of American citizens and further the natural rights of humans. This dialogue was right here in our own borders. It was long, tiring, and emotional. When met in this country with controversy and discontent, we continually challenged these notions with a litany of successes this country has seen achieved through the many works of great minds before us. However, that work is far from finished. In the words of his dream, Dr. King said, "We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back." Black Lives Matter movement highlights this progress forward in a way that allows many voices to contribute. However, these contributions become lost in a dogma of exclusion and impropriety. If there's anything I want to highlight, it is that Black Lives Matter is more than a hashtag. This movement is not something that we've stumbled upon in the Trending Now section. The movement is about questioning a system that has been deemed tried and true and voicing that its truth perceived is not a clear-cut matter. When misused, the movement loses its traction. The movement isn't about vilifying police or the latest fashion. It's about allowing an additional voice at all tables concerning the citizens of America. In the words of Dr. King in his letter from Birmingham jail, it is consistently preached that nonviolence demands that we must we must be as pure as the ends that we seek. The continual rebuttal to the Black Lives Matter movement with All Lives Matter does not answer the question of systemic imbalance. In fact, All Lives Matter shows an increasing amount of disregard for a challenge seen in our system. Black Lives Matter isn't about exploiting a group. Rather, it's about pointing out that black lives are just as important as anyone else. And for all the professors in the rooms and those that are about citations, I did not look up the citation. I just remembered this quote while other people were talking, so I apologize. But I heard this, and I heard it online once, and it comes from a poem that I know is called Voices. And it says, "Saying that you know my pain is stabbing yourself in the leg when you see me get shot. We have two different wounds, and showing me yours does nothing to heal mine." We are discussing a challenge of liberties. Black people should be free of assumption, predisposal, and expectations because of their skin color. They should have equal opportunity in a just system, and be able to say those words without them being considered buzzwords or the latest trend. This movement provides awareness and challenges a system that is convoluted and messy. This movement allows us to have a coalition and solidarity as a nation and address the mission of the dream. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Ashley Dozier. I'm a theater major. And thank you, Dr. Brown and Dr. Harris, for this opportunity. When I was first asked to be a part of this panel, I was a little nervous because when you hear the phrase Black Lives Matter, of course, to myself, I know what that means. But trying to articulate it to others was a bit of a scary thing for me. So how I was able to explain this in a clear way for my understanding is when I first came to SIUE, of course I knew, my life mattered, black rights matter, black people matter, but I never really saw it as an issue for my generation. I saw that as my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation. That's not my generation. That's not a problem that I will have to face. And for a few years in college, that's what I believed. But as I continued on with my education, especially in the department that I am in the theater and dance department here on campus, I started to notice things that before I didn't notice. And what that was, as Gary had said earlier, the unwillingness to connect to my culture, my people, my understanding of the world around me, and the understanding of the world around my people. And what I have really started to connect with, this, especially this being my last year here, is that Black Lives matters because my voice matters. And at first, I didn't really understand what that meant. And Kathy Bentley, my mentor, always told me, you know, your voice matters. Even though I am one of the only Black females in the department, that is a major, I always felt kind of like on the outside. I felt like as the spectacle, everyone was looking at me. When issues of race came up, especially in the theater department with arts and forms of expression, I was always looked at. And I was always afraid to answer or, you know, have an opinion because I didn't want it to be taken the wrong way, or I didn't want people to look at me as the angry Black girl. But seeing, especially this year of taking multicultural theater, I've really come to understand what the phrase Black Lives Matter really means. And to me, that means Black lives and Black people's voice and Black perspective matters. And I was, you know, I battled with all lives matter coming from my colleagues all the time, saying, well, I don't understand. Why does Black Lives Matter? Why is that so important? All lives matter. But when I thought about it and explaining it to others and my peers, of course all lives matter, but the crisis right now in our country is the issue of Black lives and how it's being taken for granted. And young Black men, young Black women, lives are being just thrown away so carelessly. And to me, that's what it means. My perspective matters, my voice matters, and most importantly, my life matters. Thank you.
All right, well, hello. I would like to thank Dr. Harris as well. This is a great opportunity for me because this is my first year here. I'm a transferring junior, so the exposure I'll be getting from this is huge. And oh my God. So I'm kind of emotional from the talk me and Ashley had earlier today, so forgive me if I mess up anything. All right. I believe Black Lives Matter has two separate but important meanings. The first meaning collectively recognizes the value African American lives have and their importance to the advancement of our nation. The other meaning is to eliminate the current one-sided stereotype that reinforces the negative perceptions of African Americans that are presented by mass media. When I talk to students about the movement, generally the responses are positive and understanding. However, I have met Black students who do not take as much pride in the movement as I do. They do not necessarily approve of the movement's goals and motives. On the other end, I have met white students who recognize the importance of the movement and truly support it. The principles for the Black Lives Matter movement are simple but yet very complex, valuing Black lives not only because they have been proven to be less valuable, but also to embrace and further the contributions made by African American predecessors. As a first-year student here at SIUE, I feel that this institution can do a lot more to really embrace the Black Lives Matter movement. I feel that in order to truly accept the principles of this movement, SIUE needs to appeal to more Black students. That means we need more Black teachers, we need more Black classes, and we need more Black Greek organizations, which could possibly increase African American enrollment. In addition, we need to mandate at least one Black Studies course to serve as a requirement in pursuit of one's degree. The goal of this requirement will be to make more students aware of Black contributions, cultural differences and similarities, and ultimately eliminate some misconceptions that influence racism and discrimination. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anthony Cheeseborough. I'm Associate Professor of Historical Studies here at SIUE, and I'm here to moderate the faculty, staff, and community panel. And I'd like to take this time to introduce the panel. On the far corner over there, we have the very first person I ever met when I came to campus, Professor Prince Wells. You always laugh about the story I was actually taking a picture of the library over there, and I think he thought it was a rather odd-looking thing, and so he asked me what I was doing. I said, well, I just got a job up here. I'm taking a picture of a few things so I can send them back home, let the folks know where I work now. And so we always laugh about that. But anyway, he's a great trumpet player and professor of music, professor of music theory, somebody who is quite adept in his field, as you might well imagine. And then we have Miss Kalisha Turner from Academic Advising. And we have Chief Kevin Smole. And I appreciate him being here because it's always good to hear from the perspective of law enforcement in these matters. Then we have Mr. John Cunningham, who is a retired principal, a long distinguished career in education. I've known him for a long time. We're both deacons at Mount Joy Baptist Church in Edwardsville. He's been there for a deacon for a long time. I'm still a bit of a neophyte, and so I'm learning the ropes in that aspect of life. And then I have over here a colleague of mine, Dr. Brian Jack, a man who is an expert in the history of exodusters. Those people, those African Americans who left the South and moved towards Kansas back in the 19th century after the Civil War. He's written books on African Americans in St. Louis on the way to Kansas. He's done a number of other things. He's published some really good stuff. And so I know that he has a strong historical background and can enlighten us on a number of things. All right, so what I'm going to do here is that, first of all, do any of you all have opening statements that you all would like to make? All right, well, I see Mr. Cunningham has a statement, so you're welcome to go on and make it now.
That's a surprise. I'd labored. I thought everyone else would be doing it too. I'm here as president of the Edwardsville NAACP, one of the oldest civil rights organizations in America. I'm 67 years old, and I want to thank everyone for inviting me here, and certainly listening to the students. They stole a lot of my thunder. They gave us some very good perspective on how young people are viewing this particular issue. So when I look at myself, I realize that I'm yoked with oppression because, and I'm not trying to decry anything, so I'm going to be, since I'm the only one going to make an opening statement, I'm going to make an opening statement. I have heard and seen people with skin like mine ridiculed because of their skin, their hair, their nose, their lips, their speech, their history, their laughter, their intelligence, their gender, even attacking our athletes, our female athletes, as they perform at the highest level under the guidelines that have been put up by somebody else, and ridicule our dress. Just unconscionable. And I'd also like to say, no matter how high I've tested or well I perform my job, I feel the yoke of oppression and racism tugging at me, trying to tarnish my performance. And I think that speaks well for how many African Americans are treated in the workplace. To attack your hair. Do you realize the military is just beginning to accept how African American women have to wear their hair? Just recently changed the guidelines. America finds it easy to sail and fly around the globe to point out human rights violations and atrocities in other countries and quickly suggest remedies. Yet America finds it difficult to acknowledge the suffering of America's poor and disenfranchised citizens who continue to be victims of racism, militarism, and materialism. Whenever injustice becomes the cry of our citizens, the first reaction seems to be a loud silence. A shooting in daylight on a crowded street corner in many of our communities is cloaked by a no snitching code. When law enforcement uses deadly force upon unarmed and non-threatening citizens, a code of silence, or the blue code, greets a grieving community. Both of these reactions are wrong, and it is not too much to demand a higher standard for law enforcement officers than for criminals. When I was a child, I was told, believe none of what you hear, and only half of what you see. I guess it's time to give up that half of what I see and believe none of what I see. My lying eyes have finally betrayed me completely because the visual accounts of some of the actions of a few law enforcement personnel would lead me to believe that several of these recent deaths were unnecessary and unwarranted. Many of us have seen the videos. I believe our country is the greatest experiment in mankind our world has seen. I believe law enforcement is a vital component of this experiment. Yet I know that we don't understand why we have a tendency to be afraid and to fear each other. When we don't understand something, we find out that we're fearing it first. We don't understand why some of us are black, some of us are white, some are yellow, and some are red. This fear is manifested by racism and segregation, harsh police action, and denial of opportunity perpetrated by those in power. When sympathetic citizens agree, and I mean both white and black and yellow and red, sympathetic citizens, that the present system is wrong, eventually this wrong will fade away. Dignity, sanity, and responsibility will be established. We will reach accountability in law enforcement through reasonable, actionable responses. Nevertheless, before we arrive at this point, positions will harden. The rhetoric will be harsh from both sides. Unkind words will come from those who seek change and from those who want to maintain the status quo. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that opening statement. It's a nice way to put some energy into a discussion. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask you all questions that you all have already gotten, and I'm sure that you all have had a chance to think about them. And I guess for this first question, I will start from the panelists closest to me, Dr. Jack, and then I'll go towards and finish up with Dr. Wells at the end. And I guess for the next question, I'll come back in the opposite direction so different folks will get a chance to speak sooner. Well, anyway, for the first question I'm asking is, to paraphrase Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, every legal police killing is not wise or necessary. Do you support the termination of police officers who have committed needless killings of people, even if those officers have been found not to have actually violated the law when killing an individual? All right.
Well, thanks for the easy question to begin with. I'd like to also thank Dr. Brown and Dr. Harris for asking me to participate in this panel as well. And at some point, I'll want to hopefully expand the conversation and build off what Dr. Harris talked about in terms of broadening Black Lives Matter beyond just police interaction, because I think it's much more systemic than that. I think the interaction, the interactions that we've seen that gave rise to the movement are symptoms of the systemic problems, the systemic racism that's going on. Oftentimes, critics of the Black Lives Matter movement want to focus on, well, where was the angle of this, or where was where was this person's hand or that person's hand, and want to talk very specifically about each individual case, when I see it as a much broader situation. The police officers are most people's closest and most common interaction with the government in many ways, maybe beyond the post office, right? It's police officers who are the representatives of our government who we interact with the most, right? And so I would urge much more civilian oversight with police officers. I think the question asking committed needless killings of people, even if those officers have been found to not actually have violated the law, police officers are public servants. I'm the son of a former police officer. My dad was a cop before I was born, and was injured in the line of duty and quit being a cop because he was injured in the line of duty. So this idea of police officers being separate from the law, I think, is very problematic. I think the idea of having much more civilian oversight, much more community policing, and much more interaction where police officers come from the communities that they police, as Dr. Harris suggested earlier, could help to maybe remedy some of these problems. Thank you.
As a member of a racial minority, after the recent elections in the House and Senate, and the current makeup of the Supreme Court, with its rulings on many cases, I now find myself to be in a political minority. Therefore, I set aside my personal feelings in this matter and agree that we should follow the rule of law. If that officer has gone through the courts and all the levels of the court investigating his actions or her actions, I would have to yield to the government that we have ruling this country. So I wouldn't call for him to resign. I think it's up to the system to deal with him. But I know something to be true. I know why the statue of Lady Justice wears a blindfold and carries a sword in one hand and holds unbalanced scales in the other one. And if you have an education and don't understand that, then you need to go back and do some reading in civics. Justice does not always prevail. And it should not always be our actions to be vigilante actions. We have to keep working within this great experiment. Do you realize what this country is? How many differences we represent in this one room, and how we are all trying to live here together? Racism and the problems we have in doing that, it's like trying to peel the layers off of an onion. It seems like an endless job. So I again reiterate, I would have to support the rule of law.
Well, first, I want to apologize for, especially the students, for not getting a snow day. I was up at 4 o'clock this morning checking the roadways and the university and the surrounding area, and everything was not too bad. So that's why we're here. So apologize for that. Relating to the question, the trend is when an officer is involved in the use of deadly force, they go to a grand jury, and grand jury comes back on some of these. I know True Bill, which there was no justification for charges. And then it gets thrown back to the police chief or the police administration. And a lot of the times that you're seeing is our hands are tied because there is no one, the court ruled that it was justified. Then as far as the police chief, we would look at were any policies broken on the use of force or any other policy we have in place. If there was, then you could proceed with discipline or termination. If there wasn't, it's going to be very difficult to fire that officer or even discipline that officer. And if you try to fire him unjustifiably, you're going to be in court for years. So a lot of the times the hands are tied as far as the police administration, as far as the question is getting rid of these officers that use deadly force, that even when the courts come back and say that it was justified. And also, like the question was, every legal police killing is not wise or necessary. We have to do better as far as law enforcement. We have to train our officers, give our officers the equipment they need. Some of these incidents, a taser could have been used, especially someone that's unarmed, even with a knife. Officers can get in position and use a taser where you don't have to use deadly force. So, but that comes down to training. That comes down to it comes down to money, unfortunately. In this day and age, there's not a whole lot of that out there, especially in Illinois. But we are searching for grants to get equipment, and there's not a whole lot of grants out there right now, but we're always trying to improve. I can tell a little bit about our police department. This past year, as far as training, we came in the third highest in hours of training for our officers for every department in the Metro East area. And there's departments 3 times the size of ours. We have 35 sworn officers, and I believe we came in at like 2,700 and some hours. And these are departments that are the size of Madison County Sheriff's Department. They have like 90 officers. And so I'm very proud of that we're well trained.
This way. Can everybody hear me okay? Maybe I need to slide up too. Okay. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, forgive me, I'm fighting a cold. First, I want to thank Dr. Brown and her committee for having me up here. I want to commend the students for being honest and living in their truth and speaking their truth. I think, looking at this question, I'm be honest, I feel kind of torn. Mainly one as an educator, and you have students that, or I have 2 boys, that you kind of look at the situations and you want to tell them to trust the system. But as a mother of 2 black boys that are amazingly beautiful, I do not put that naiveness in the forefront of me. I truly believe that there are really good police officers out there. I have some in my family. I also know that there's a lot of things that work against a young man or a young woman that has to go through the court system, especially if they have a jury. And that jury is not always with the training of being able to see things without a bias. So reality is, I don't necessarily think that, and I think every situation is definitely different. But the one key thing in this question, it said a needless killing. And that's where I have an issue. If it's a needless killing, there is apparently a lack of a need to kill that person. So if there's a lack of a need to kill that person, why is this police officer not held to a higher standard? So that is kind of the concern that I have. Once again, a lot of times when I look at the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that, I remember the Mike Brown situation, and there were some things I would allow my sons to see and some things that I wouldn't. And I remember just out of my youngest child's mouth when they said that they were not going to indict him, and I had to explain what that meant to my son. He said, well, Mommy, he didn't have anything. Why did they kill him? I said, sweetheart, as simple as it is that you say that, some people really just don't get it. And when you hear it out of a child's mouth that can understand how needless something is, and they don't have the education their mom has right now. They're working towards it. They don't have the training the police officer have, but they but the thing is, they can see the difference. I have a problem with the amount of excuses and the loopholes that are available legally for police officers. For Walter Scott, the police officer got off on a $500,000, was it 500? Yeah, $500,000 bail. And the reason was they didn't want to keep him in the prison because his trial is in October, because it gives him implication of being guilty. But that happens all the time. So why does he get a different, response? And he's been indicted. So it's kind of things like that. When you see that it's good for one, it's not good for the other. So I can't fully put my trust in saying that immediately they just need to be terminated. But at the same time, I don't think I would want that person who needlessly killed somebody to be out on the street while my child might be walking down the street, because if he was to kill my child and somebody would tell me it's needless, or even if it went through the courts years upon end, my child would never return to me ever again. And I don't think that no amount of time in a court, no amount of money could ever bring a peace to a parent that has to deal with that. And as a black mother, that conversation that Melvina's brother had is a conversation we have already started with our children. It is all too important for them to understand, though you are amazing, though you are beautiful, and though you are intelligent, not everybody out here sees you like that. And not everybody's going to have a moment to sit there and have that conversation with you before they try to do something to you. So I have to make sure that my children are understanding that. But again, I kind of answered the question, but I don't want to run on too long.
Hi. I'm going to kind of pick up on what was just said about, the question has to do with needless killings. Could you read that question again for me, please?
All right. To paraphrase Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, every legal police killing is not wise or necessary. Do you support the termination of police officers who have committed needless killings of people, even if those officers have been found not to have actually violated the law when killing an individual? I mean, well, bottom line is that, to piggyback on what police chief said, is that a killing might be legally justified, but it can be found to have been unnecessary. It can be found to have been a violation of the department's procedures. And so really that's what I'm talking about. If a killing has been found to have been, legally covered, an officer can't be prosecuted for it, but it's a killing that was needless and really didn't follow proper procedure. Is that somebody who should be given a second chance or should be allowed to stay on the department? But anyway, so maybe I should have gone into greater detail on it, but that's essentially what I was asking.
Yeah, it's a pretty nuanced question. It's difficult to say who should judge that or how it should be judged. There's lots of variables in the way that it's articulated. I often think about the relationship between the word policy and police. I assume that their police primary mission is to enforce policies. It's implied in the name police. It disturbs me. I'm going to bring my comments back to your question, Anthony. It disturbs me when police unions come out in rabid support of people who have killed an unarmed black person. And it disturbs me when the public sends hundreds of thousands of dollars to people who just gunned down an unarmed black man or a woman. And they make these people wealthy as a consequence. Should a policeman be fired for killing an unarmed or a needless killing? I think there should be some oversight. I mean, I think people have made very good points. They need to look at it. I think that if it's a criminal act, then they should be treated like a criminal. So I would say not only fired if it's not necessary, but should be treated like a criminal. I don't really see that happening. But once again, it's a nuanced question. I don't want to pontificate on the subject, but I don't necessarily think this person needs to be fired if but it's hard to say. If you gave me a specific instance, then maybe I could give a specific answer. You know, I mean, we've seen a lot of specific instances in the media.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a couple of examples. I think, for instance, like with Eric Garner in New York. Now, he died in the process, being subdued because he was resisting arrest. Now, a number of people argue that he died as a result of asphyxiation through the application of a chokehold. And now, it was found that the officer who administered the chokehold, Pantaleo, he was not indicted for a crime, but he's still on death duty to this day because it was felt that he didn't do everything entirely proper. Now, one of the interesting things that's come up in the last week is that the officer who was supervising him, the supervising officer, who happens to be a black woman, she's actually going to lose a job because it said that, being the supervising officer, she should not have allowed the officers who were in the act of subduing Garner to administer the chokehold. As the supervising officer, the chief of police, Bratton in New York, is saying that you should have told them to, if the man said he couldn't breathe, get your arm off his neck. There's like 6 of you all there. You can find some other way to apprehend him. And so therefore, she's losing her job. Now, Pantaleo himself, he's still on death duty. He still doesn't have his gun or anything. So even though he's not going to jail, he's not back on the beat anymore. There's a similar situation with Tamir Rice in Cleveland, where the officer has not been indicted, but his case is still being reviewed because, most people, if you look at the videotape, he drives up, gets out the car, kills the boy within 2 seconds. And, most people will tell you that that's not standard police procedure when you have an armed person, especially in a state with open carry laws like Ohio, where actually owning a gun or having a gun in public is not a crime. And so, therefore, right now, they're looking at the possibility of a disciplinary action or relieving him of his appointment as a police officer, because although he did not commit a crime, there's a strong possibility that what he did was so far outside of accepted police procedure that he should not be allowed to maintain to hold that job anymore. And so those are two specific incidents that I could have cited.
Well, let me say, I can't remember the name of the young man who was he in Walmart in Ohio?
Yeah,
in an open carry state. Was it a what, I don't know what kind of a rifle or something?
He had a
like
BB
that,
gun.
right?
If you go to Walmart, they got BB guns all in the section.
Somebody calls in a report there's a black man in there with a gun. Police show up and shoot him in an open carry state, right? Mm-hmm. They just show up and shoot him. So if you ask me if a person like that should be fired, I say it's a no-brainer. He should be prosecuted for murder. You can walk up and down the street with a gun openly. It's legal. So why show up and shoot this guy without even talking to him? Or to choke somebody to death on camera, like Garner in New York. I think that's a no-brainer. You start to parse it and dissect it and attack every little aspect. A chokehold is illegal, right? Mm-hmm. You did it on camera. Why is there a debate on that? So you can look at I have to look at individual instances to judge it, but there are some justified, I'm not a police officer, I know it's a tough job. I'm sure there are justified killings. What I've noticed is that with African American communities, when somebody's a criminal and they get shot, you never see the black public trying to defend them. It's only these needless killings, as you say, or unarmed black people getting gunned down. That's a crime. But when somebody's a criminal, I've never seen the black public rise up in protest for a criminal getting prosecuted or sent to jail or even shot, so forth, right? I've never seen it. So I don't think these questions are unreasonable.
All right, we'll go on to the next question, and Dr. Wells, you get this one first.
Thank you, Anthony.
All right. Do you support the creation of a permanent office of special prosecutors to handle cases of police misconduct? And I will give a little bit more background to this. The reason I'm asking this question is that there have been a couple of cases I can think, for instance, the case of the killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson, or the killing of Tamir Rice that I cited earlier in Cleveland, Ohio, where to me it's fairly obvious that the prosecutor, from the beginning had made a decision that he didn't want to prosecute. But he sends it through a grand jury, and once in the grand jury, he essentially acts as a defense attorney for the police officer, which, if you know anything, I'm not a lawyer, but from what I understand about grand juries, the whole purpose of a grand jury is to give evidence as to why a person should be indicted. That's why the common expression is that a good prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich, in a grand jury. But yet you have these situations where prosecutors, provide exculpatory evidence. They provide experts who vindicate the officer. They allow the officers to testify without cross-examination. And these are all these are all privileges that would never be afforded to a civilian who is being indicted. And so, to me, this looks like a situation where you have a prosecutor who simply does not have the political courage to say, I don't want to indict, which, whether you agree with it or not, if a prosecutor, that's the prosecutor's authority. They have the authority to look at a case and say, I don't want to bring this toward the grand jury. Now, once you make that decision, you have to take the political fallout. And so, therefore, when you have this indictment, when you have a case go before a grand jury and either the prosecutor doesn't make a recommendation or makes a recommendation and then proceeds to undermine it, to me it goes against the goodwill of the grand jury process. And so that's why a number of legislatures have brought up bills about the possibility of having special prosecutors. And, I gave more of my opinion than I really had intended to. But I definitely want to hear what you all think about these bills, because as a matter of fact, there's actually a bill in Congress now to create special prosecutors for situations where federal law enforcement officers kill people in the line of duty.
Well, while you were talking, the name Kenneth Starr came to mind, who was brought in and carried on years of prosecution of Bill Clinton for his questionable relationship with Monica Lewinsky, right? And Congress thought that this should be investigated to the hilt. So I think that when someone is killed, that it needs to be looked at. Just like if some criminal guns down somebody on the street, people look at that. When there's a police officer, in these situations that we're talking about with questionable killings, of course, I think that, and the politics of the situation tends to dictate that a person's colleagues and the police and the criminal justice system in any particular location. I mean, these people work together a lot. I think it's very subjective. It's very politically charged, and I think it's more to hope for that your colleagues will be objective in looking at the circumstances of the event. So yes, I think there are many instances where there should be some independent or special prosecutor brought in to look at and deal with these situations. But it's hard to paint with a broad brush. Like I say, I think you have to look at these things on a case-to-case basis and look at the issue and let your decision be issue-driven. And yeah, in many cases, I think that there needs to be some kind of objective critique of the circumstances involving these situations. Even if the person is found guilty or innocent, it needs to be looked at, because you're dealing with a matter of people having confidence in the process. And how can you have confidence in these processes? Right? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All right.
All right, let's see, is Professor Carter, that you down there now?
Yes.
All right, well, I guess I'll let you take a crack at the question, too.
Could you read the question for her again, please?
Oh, okay. Well, the question is, do you support the creation of a permanent office of special prosecutors to handle cases of police misconduct?
Yes, I do. I was kind of listening to what Dr. Wells or Prince Wells was saying, and I agree with that. I just think there needs to be an objective process to determine, whether it's right or wrong. I think in order to build faith in communities and build faith with people, we have to be able to objectively look at all of the American institutions without bias one way or another. So I do think we need something. How we pull it together, I don't know, but I think that's worthy of conversation.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to get some, let's see, Ms. Turner and then Chief Smole.
Here we go again. Can you hear me? Okay. I think for me, I do believe there should be, this is all in my face. There should be, I do believe there should be a permanent process, and I agree with Dr. Carter that there should be some objectivity. I think a perfect example of why that should be is because of Mike Brown. I honestly didn't get a full understanding of it until that case and following it, where learning the history of McCullough. And, his father, correct me if I'm wrong, but his father was a police officer and was killed by a black man. So knowing that history and also knowing that he had a real strong interaction with the police department, I felt like he himself should have recused himself. But the thing is, I also looked at it in terms of the grand jury and how he, in my personal opinion, maneuvered the situation legally, and under the whole entire bubble of transparency. And, when you got lawyers on TV saying how you said a ham sandwich, I heard a Twinkie. They can indict a Twinkie. So, but the whole thing of transparency, he was just giving everything out there, but putting everything out there allowed there to be some doubt. And I feel like he knew that. And I feel like by saying that he didn't know that, I will be insulting his intelligence, because I think it was insulting my intelligence when I saw the process and how it was working. So seeing something like that and seeing how somebody who's supposed to uphold the law is supposed to be unbiased and is doing this where everybody, if anybody's paying attention and have any understanding of what's going on, was seeing what was happening, is the reason why this needs to be put in place, because there was complete bias. And legally, you couldn't do anything to him, because he was within his rights of what to present to a grand jury. So that's kind of looking at that case and understanding how it really works. I can only imagine when you got a case and it's not on TV. These young men, or even if it's a criminal that might have had a history before, and not having somebody to fight for them. Somebody who might be in court as we speak right now that's dealing with that same situation. I think the one thing about the Black Lives Matter movement is putting a lot of things to light. To some people, it might just be happening. These are things that the black community has been screaming for years that is happening, and now everything's under a microscope, and now everybody's just seeing it. So that's kind of why I'm so proud of this movement, because it's really putting a magnifying glass on those people that think that they are getting away with this from now on. It's allowing the black community to get restless, and we need to be restless and stop getting complacent with the different things that are happening to our community right now, because it became such a norm to see that. But now people are getting riled up, people are getting bothered. So with that kind of movement happening, then I see the implementation and creation of a permanent special prosecutor to build that trust, like she was saying before, because it has to start somewhere, but that means that some things have to change and not go as business as normal.
Yes, police. We do work with our Madison County State's Attorney, Tom Gibbons. Police, we work closely with our local prosecutor. They're the ones that we meet with to get our misdemeanor and criminal charges, and they prosecute the case for us. So, yeah, I am in support of, having a special prosecutor. And how do we set this up? I think it's something we have to work with our local lawmakers to get some laws changed in the state of Illinois. And maybe just thinking that we have maybe a handful of these special prosecutors throughout the state that would take over when they're and prosecute these cases and look at them and have a special panel or like a special jury made up where that it reviews these cases when there is one a deadly force is used. And another thing that came to mind, like if a local police department would have an incident where they did use deadly force, I know what we would do, we would contact Illinois State Police to come in to investigate that case. And I don't think it's something that if one of my officers had to use deadly force, I don't think it's something that the SIUE Police Department should have to handle investigation. We would contact the state police for that investigation, so you have an unbiased investigation that is being conducted. So there's a lot of things to look at. I think it's a good question, and momentum is there for change. And I am supportive of a special prosecutor in these type of incidents.
Thank you. Mr. Cunningham?
Thank you. And well, I turned the idea over a little bit, and I asked myself, does Black Lives matter? So my first gut feeling about this question, matter to whom? Does Black Lives matter to the President, to Congress, Supreme Court, the governor, the state legislature, the mayors, the police officers, to you in this situation? Point of fact is, it's difficult, if not impossible, for any group to police itself. I don't care if it's educators, I don't care if it's priests. We've seen some of the things that have come out of the church on both sides of it. So it's difficult to police yourself. The question that you pose, the idea does have some merit. And it would be very difficult, but I could suggest that you could do it with attorneys who are appointees of the state Supreme Court, who have jurisdiction over limited areas or regions of the state and serve limited terms. Their rulings should follow due process and go through the courts. But I think it can be done. But we're going to have to come to grips with, does Black Lives matter, and to whom?
Thank you.
Thanks for asking this question, Anthony. This is probably, the first part of this is probably something a criminal justice or sociology professor could answer better than I, but it's my understanding, at least, that the United States has far more police killings of its citizens than any other industrialized country. Not even close. There's not even a close second. While at the same time, we don't even know how many police officers kill civilians because there's no one keeping count throughout the country. After Michael Brown, now some different journalistic entities have started trying to keep count, but we still don't have a clear number on how many people. Short answer is yes, but I think it should be expanded beyond the question that you ask. During the Civil Rights Movement, when states were violating American citizens' civil rights, the Justice Department came in. And the Justice Department investigated what states were doing to violate people's civil rights. So I don't really see it as Office of Special Prosecutors, I personally think the Justice Department should come in, federal government, and investigate whenever an entity of the state, which is what a police officer is, kills a civilian. In combination with local civilian oversight, as I mentioned earlier. We saw what happened after Ferguson and what we saw in the county, St. Louis County, when the Justice Department started looking at the Ferguson government and the police tactics, and how that instituted a few changes immediately, right? So I think it should be expanded beyond a special prosecutor or a local prosecutor, but I think the Federal Justice Department should come in and investigate. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, feel free to give the panel a hand after we finish a question. I think they're thinking pretty hard. All right, well, I'll go to question number 3, and you start this one this time. Okay. And I apologize, it was a bit of a typo when I sent it out to you, but I'll try to read it and clean it up a bit. African Americans often speak of giving their children, especially sons, to talk about how to respond when approached by police. In a nutshell, the talk stresses the need to remain calm and avoid creating a pretext for the use of force or arrest. Although the talk makes sense in terms of sheer survival, does the expectation of total obsequious compliance create an environment where the basic rights of African Americans as citizens seems unimportant?
And I really like this question when you sent it to me. And this is where maybe I'd like to expand a little bit.
Please do.
The last line you wrote, does it create an environment where the basic rights of African Americans as citizens seems unimportant? And this is where I think this gets to the heart of the Black Lives Matter movement in general. I'm a historian, so when the Black Lives Matter movement started, I immediately thought of it in terms of historical context. And I was reminded of the I Am a Man posters held up by during the Civil Rights movement. People claiming their humanity. And I would say that the rights of African Americans as citizens has never seemed important in the United States. It's ugly to say, it's ugly to hear, but it's true. If we go back to the approximately 5,000 African Americans who were lynched in between 1880 and 1930, with the federal government and no one else doing anything about it in general. The Tuskegee experiments, de jure segregation under Jim Crow, de facto segregation with redlining and residential segregation, or the sundown towns that surround us here in southern Illinois. The response to Hurricane Katrina. People drinking poisonous water in Flint, Michigan right now. And when you compare the response to the crack epidemic of the 1980s in terms of locking up black people, to the heroin epidemic of the suburbs lately of we need to have treatment for these poor people. The rights of African Americans as American citizens has never been important to this country in many ways, right? And that's where I think gets to the heart of the Black Lives Matter movement. And building on what Dr. Harris was saying earlier, expanding the systemic racism that's going on. And that's one reason I have so much respect for our students. I look out in the crowd and I see students who I've had in class, and I see students on the panel, and their activism and their involvement and their willingness to take stands and to bring to light the issues in their lives. So I think that this idea of the talk, I'm white, I will never have to give that, and I don't have kids. So I will never have to give that talk. But I have a lot of friends who have had to give that talk to their children. I've had a lot of friends who had to live that talk as they were young adults. And no, they were given the talk when they were young. Yeah, exactly. And it's the entire environment. It's not just the interactions with the police. Thank you.
I first heard the talk from Onion Harden on the radio, so I'm going to give it to you. Pull the car off the road in a safe place. Lower the window on the driver's side. Do not exit the car unless asked. Upon request, present your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. Tell the officer where they are before reaching for them. If you are suspected of drunk driving and refuse to take a sobriety test, the police may seize your driver's license. You have the right not to consent to search of your vehicle. If the police state they have probable cause, they may begin to search your car without your consent. Do not interfere, but clearly state your lack of consent. And finally, if you are given a ticket, sign it. You can always fight the case in court later. And here it is. Do not try to hold court on the side of the road. That's some good advice. I'll go further. I believe both police and the public need training and dialogue in this area. There should be public service announcements about how to react during encounters with law enforcement. Being stopped by the police creates anxiety for the officers and the citizens. I think one of the most terrifying moments for me is when I'm pulled over and I watch the police officer put his hand on his weapon. I understand that they have moments when they may have to fear for their lives. I understand one of the most dangerous things they can do is pull over a car late at night or at any time. And so we should have city officials and judges openly discuss how fees and fines are used so we can understand what they're doing with this money and get an idea of how much of the city's budget is coming from these police actions towards citizens. If you recall, that's one of the things that was uncovered in Ferguson. I always felt it was, to use my own personal phrase, it was legalized rape by the police when they pulled me over. I mean, I don't think it's a person in this room, and I'm going out on a limb, that haven't pushed the pedal to the metal and gone over the speed limit. And we often watch others go by, and then maybe it's just human nature to feel they got me because I was black. I don't know. But it appears that way. But once we start looking at Ferguson and all the other municipalities, and then you have to ask yourself about Edwardsville. Is there a speed trap in Edwardsville? But I think it's important that we do some work with each other, with the police, and understanding how we expect them to treat us so we would know how to react when we engage them. And we leave that out. It's no reason that shouldn't be a part of the information that we impart to each other. Maybe it would decrease some of the anxiety. The items that I read come from a pamphlet that the NAACP puts out as well. Thank you.
I agree with Mr. Cunningham. There should be more meetings on how for the public to interact with police. I think that's kind of left out in driver's ed. I know it was when I went through. But yeah, as far as the talk, I think every parent should have a talk with their children. I have two boys, 10 and 7, so we recently took our 10-year-old through at Children's Hospital Home Alone class. And there is a magnet with information that you put in your local police department's number, fire department, and we talked to him about, when would you call the police and how do you interact with them if they do show up and you need assistance. But I will have that talk with both of them once they become 16 or get close to that age about what to do if you are pulled over by the police and how to interact with them. So I have a few years, or about 6 years, for that conversation. But I always tell, we have monthly staff meetings with my command staff, and I have one of my command staff members in here, Lieutenant Brigham, and he'll tell you this too. I start the meetings, I tell my command staff, treat everybody with respect and always be courteous, even if they may not deserve it. If you live by that, you're going to be right, almost 100% of the time. And so far, we've been pretty good with that, and that's good advice. But everything Mr. Cunningham said, yeah, about the traffic stops, put your hands on the steering wheel 9 to 3. It's officer safety. We're taught that day one in the police academy. I went through it like almost 22 years ago in the police academy. Traffic stops are some of the most dangerous things that police officers encounter, especially at night. You can't see, you don't know who's in the car, you don't know what their intentions may be until you interact with the individual. So hands, we definitely want to see individuals' hands. They don't have to be in a steering wheel, they have to be in view. And basically, you go listen to the officer, and you do have rights. You do have a right not to have the officer search your vehicle. So the individuals do have rights, and that they should be made aware of. And the officer can educate those individuals, even at the traffic stop, on what those rights are. But definitely, I think every parent should have that talk, no matter what race you are, with your child.
I think once again, I see this in two ways. In regards to my sons, I'm one of those, like, you know what, I'd rather you live to the next day, so shut your mouth. And just do what they ask you, respectfully. And that's kind of how I stand. But then I also remember a time we was on the Quick Trip parking lot, and if anybody knows me, I am daddy's baby. My mama would tell you that's that child's daddy's baby. That's daddy's baby. Leave her alone about her daddy. And I was with my daddy, and we got pulled over at a Quick Trip parking lot. And I'm fiercely protective over my family, and I know this about myself. And this police officer pulled up, and he was so condescending and so rude. And my dad grew up in the South. Like, if you learn the history, to some of my other young students, if you learn the history of your family, then you will really have an appreciation of what you have right now. And I saw my dad through the eyes of what he dealt with in the South, because he was a part of his school getting segregated there. And I saw how humble and quiet he got. But while he was getting humble and quiet, I felt like all his feistiness that he ever had in him was just brewing up inside of me. And I was on the phone, and I remember talking to my friend, and everything I was feeling, I was talking on the phone. And my dad looked at me. He has this real mean look at me. And he looked at me like, I need you to shut up. Because I was like, this man ain't got no sense. He's talking like he ain't got no sense. Girl, I'm rocking back and forth. I'm saying all this because I was spewing over. But it infuriated me because I saw my dad was being respectful. And he was still getting treated in front of his child or his daughter like he was less than a man. And he was being accused of things. And then at one point, I do have a really mean look. And I shut it up because my daddy gave me the look. But then the look started to go back to that police officer. And the thing is, it's just the having to clench your teeth and not say nothing when you know somebody is so terribly disrespectful. I mean, I probably could have got us in the worst type of trouble. I'm serious. And I understand that. But seeing that what somebody had to take, what I was taking in those few minutes, what some people had to take on a daily, there's a reason why God has some of us born at a certain time and some of us not born at others. I truly believe that, because I probably would have been somebody's roadkill somewhere else. I'm not being funny, but I'm serious, because that feistiness, it took me to a whole different level, because nowhere ever should a man who's being respectful, regardless of your color, or a woman, should be disrespected in such a manner and they were being completely respected. So I commend you for pushing that with your officers, because truly, if he was just respectful, it would have been just a simple traffic ticket, and everybody would have went on about their way. But it sits with me, and this happened years ago. And I'm just saying, there's times where when it comes to my kids, even my father, I saw it modeled, but I also understand the inferiority that would come with it. And it's for me as a mother to teach my sons, you're going to feel this, but I need you to live to the next day so we can talk this out and fight it if we have to. So I think it's getting them to understand that, but also understanding and teaching them you are equal to them regardless of what they think. And that's something my parents always taught me. I don't care if you stand in front of the President of the United States. He puts his pants on one leg at a time, and so do you. And that's kind of how they taught me. So it doesn't matter your position, doesn't matter your color. If you see yourself to be equal, and you got to also have mentors when they're around you to kind of repeat that to you. When you're in a position and you're feeling less than, remind yourself that just as equally as they should be getting to know you, it'll be a privilege of them to get to know you as it is for you to know them. So it's just kind of those certain practices, but I can see how it's an issue, but I need my children and our youth to live more importantly, so.
Chief, I actually think that your suggestions about educating people how to conduct themselves, I think that's a great idea. I don't know if do we do this here at the university? We talk to students or faculty and staff for that matter about?
Yeah, when I became chief, I created a position, community outreach. Lieutenant Brigham is in charge of that, and he regularly meets with student groups, Greek and student government, faculty and staff groups around campus, and a lot of the things we do is presentations on safety, but a lot of that is brought in there, especially like international students. When they come over the first time, like they've never experienced police in a country and what to do if they get pulled over. So we do that mostly with like international, but we're welcome to do that with any student group on campus now in the future. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah,
because that's something that's left out.
Mm-hmm. I want to answer the question, the basic rights of African American citizens that seem important, and of course I would say yes. But I'm going to try and keep my answer short, but I do genealogy work. I think I've talked to some people here tracing the history of African American family since slavery. And there was no such thing as police protecting the rights of African Americans during slavery. I think we would all agree with that. Since then, we've had severe Jim Crow. We've had slavery by another name, and the rights of blacks were not protected there. I think we all agree with that. I could go on and on, but my point is, in the history of the United States, there has never been a situation, we've never experienced police being there to protect the rights of blacks. During the Civil Rights Movement, the police were there with fire hoses and dogs, etc., denying people the right to vote, on and on and on. We know that. So I think that we need to look at our dismal failure in protecting the rights of blacks and our willingness to accept that as a country. I don't know where we go from here, but I just want to say that we've never protected the rights of blacks. It's always been diminished at best. And, something as a police person or people dealing with policy in general, we need to look at that. We really need new practices and a new attitude toward understanding the basic rights and enforcing those rights, because we've never done it. It's never been done. As a genealogist, I'm not just giving my opinion. I could go on and on about the fact that this has never, for white people, the police have been there to protect and serve. But during slave times, they were there to put down slave insurrections, period. Drop the hammer on them. After that, it's been the same thing. During the civil rights movement, drop the hammer on them, keep them in their place. And we haven't gotten much further beyond that. So we really need to look at this. We really need to look at it. Yes, I think the basic rights of African Americans seem unimportant, but we can change that. But we have to look at it like we're doing and begin to revise this.
So I'm going to build a little bit on what everybody else has said, because it's nice to be at this end of the panel to kind of process it all. And several things stuck out to me. One, the talk is not just about boys, right? I want that to be clear. The talk is about being black, right? Whatever you identify your gender to be, it's about being black in America. That's the talk. And I have a 16-year-old daughter. I don't have the fun of having a boy child, but I have a daughter, and I have the talk with her. And several things strike me. One, the chief, I appreciate that fact that you encourage your officers and are encouraging the talk. But what really kind of hit me hard was your description of talking to your sons when they turned 16. And that struck me. It kind of made me go like this in the back of my head, because I thought, oh no, they just had that talk since she could talk, or before then. And I come from a family of law enforcement, and we still have the talk. And my nephew, my brother's a detective in the Kansas City area, and his son gets to talk, and his daughter gets to talk. And so I think this is very much about race in many ways, and I don't want that to ever get lost in the dialogue, because as a black officer, he struggles with what it means to be black on the force, and what it means to be black in this climate right now, in the post-Ferguson climate, or the active Ferguson climate, and how he's understood as a black man, as an officer, as a black man, choosing a career that he's always wanted to do. And so I think that it's want to be clear to people that the talk is for black. It's a black talk, and it's beyond just what do you do when you get pulled over. You know, when we visit my brother in the Kansas City area, when his coworkers come by the house, it's like, okay, watch this, don't do that. And I know that's Uncle Garen's friends, but we black. And he'll say, when such and such comes in the door, da 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 da. It's a talk, and the talk has so many layers of what to do, how to dress, how to act, what to reach for, where to put your hands, what to say, what not to say, because that's how we socialize into white America. Right? We're grown into this talk in order to fit. And then when we fit, then we can rise. And it's a tricky dynamic that I think we as African Americans have to play all the time. And so I just want race to be very clear when we talk about the talk or talk about policing, because I think it's a little bit beyond policing. The other thing that struck me that everybody was saying is I think that we are socialized by this history of oppression in this country. And so no matter how many times we try to train our brains and train our minds and do better, we see it in pop culture, we see it in TV, we hear it on radio, we get the talk from different versions, we get all kinds of talks, but we are socialized that African Americans are less than. And that's deep for me as an African American woman, because it pisses me off, I can be honest. But that's the socialization, that no matter how many times I try to educate, even myself, that when I'm in certain communities, I lock my door and I go, whoa, what'd you do that for? They look like you. But then I recognize that I've been socialized into this way of thinking, that I have to act and be and treat people a certain way. And so I'm really concerned with how do we rethink that? How do we change, not just implementing institutions and policies and agencies, but how do we reshape and rethink what history has done to all of us, that we see a certain group of people with such negative. And so when it comes to the question of basic rights, yes, should we have basic rights? Yes. Do we? As an African American woman, I do not feel like I have basic rights in America that I live in. I don't.
So one of the things that we're going to do, just to give everybody's legs a little break, one of the things we're going to do to thank both panels, thank our student panel, and to thank our faculty, staff, and community panels, we're going to stand up, and you got to do what I say now. We're going to stand up and we're going to say, right on. And I need to hear it loud. So we're going to stand up and go back to the 70s. Right on. Right. So everybody stand up, stretch your leg. Right on. Right on. Right on. Right on. Right on. Right on. Thank you. You can see that. So it gives everybody a break and get to stretch your legs and everything. But one of the things we want to do is now we want to open the floor up for some questions to our panel. But before we open the floor up to questions to our panel, I'd like for you to clearly, Christian Lee, please come up quickly. I would like for him to quickly, like 2 minutes, a minute, explain the photo exhibition that he put out.
Hello everyone, my name is Christian K. Lee. I work here at the school newspaper. Basically, I started these two projects, Ferguson Unrest on my right, probably your left, basically to show the unrest that took place in Ferguson. But I also did this project on the left to continue the conversation and show how, basically I feel like Ferguson was the aftermath of like police brutality. And I wanted to do this project to show, in fact, what does proper community policing look like? So I searched really hard to find somebody in the community that I felt like was a good example of great community policing to continue the conversation. But that's basically what the project in whole is about. Yeah.
Thank you. Now the floor is open for questions. Please come to the mic. We have 2 mics here. And you can direct your question to the student panel or the faculty panel.
This is for the faculty panel. I'd like to kind of readdress the very first question that was asked. And I want to start that off by just acknowledging, Dr. Jack, I think you said something really valuable, that maybe it's even a little unfortunate that we have to spend so much of our time talking about the criminal justice system and not these other egregious matters of systematic inequality and oppression. But in my experience as a millennial generation sociology instructor here at SIUE, I've been teaching race and ethnicity now since the semester that Michael Brown was shot. This is the question that young white people are willing to start engaging in race relations conversations. I have not seen anything else open up the floor of discussion, and I also think that this is really where the Black Lives Matter movement hinges, because it forces the American people to actually evaluate how much value we're going to put on Black lives, and by extension, on all life in the United States. And so I do want to spend a little more time on that question and just kind of readdress. So we use the phrase needless killing with that question, but what I more so focus on in my classes is the phrase that has come out of several court cases repeatedly of honest but mistaken beliefs. There's one young Black man who was shot, his name is Mark Dugan, by a police officer. The police officer was indicted and went to trial, but the jury found him not guilty because they found him to have had an honest but mistaken belief that Mark Dugan had a gun. He did not have a gun. He was unarmed. But the jury let him off because they believed that he had an honest but mistaken belief. And so that's really the question that I want to ask, to just kind of redirect to that. And rather than talking about needless killings, address, what do we do? So now we have a system who has decided repeatedly, Mark Dugan is just one example, these cases where police officers shot someone because they believed that they had a gun. And as a sociologist, this is our socialization process. We need to indict our socialization process. We have a socialization process that teaches mistaken beliefs. And should we allow people to kill people because they have honest beliefs that are mistaken. What do we do about that? I think that's a really, really big question. And yeah, that's all I have.
So was that a question or just a comment?
Should we indict police officers for honest or mistaken beliefs? Should the jury have left them off?
Well, I think we can probably, to answer this question, I think we already kind of answered that kind of before, but I think we have to have more training. Police officers do more scenario-based trainings. I know when we have firearms training, we qualify, we do twice a year. We qualify once a year. One's more of a tactical type training, where we have, I mean, it's a silhouette, it's a paper, it's a person, and the officer is turned, and then when we turn the target, and the person could be holding a cell phone, they could be holding a badge, it could be another police officer, it could have a gun, or they could have a knife. That's the type of training we do, but we need to have more scenario-based training using there's FAT systems out there that are you're watching basically a video and a scenario go down, and you can use your pepper spray, your taser, or if you have to use your handgun, you can use that as well. But there has to be more training to, can we reduce the use of deadly force? Absolutely. Are we going to get it down to zero? I think being realistically, probably not. But we can significantly reduce the use of deadly force in our country, and it has to come down to training.
I want to also add to that. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think we need to deal with trauma in officers. You know, I think about my family, and especially my brother. You cannot tell me that people can see some of the ick of life every day and be all right. You're not all right, right? As long as we continue to cut mental health care and we stigmatize officers when they need it because they have to look at it and deal with it, despite the best trainings you implement, I'm going to respond from trauma. Any of us would respond from trauma, right? Because I'm nervous and I'm scared. And this is my job and I love it, but I have a family I want to take care of. So when I see something, I respond. I react. That reaction isn't good enough because it's killing people, but until we deal with their mental health care, right, and give them the care they need and allow them time off and to do the things they need to do to take care of their psyche, then we can't expect the best of trainings to help them respond differently, because none of us would respond any different if we were traumatized.
And to build off, I completely agree about the socialization piece. Police officers are a product of our society. I mean, they're socialized the same way the rest of us are, and so are juries. You know, and so, you know, we know, and as a sociologist, you know, that the socialization in our society teaches us that black men are threats. The socialization teaches that that people see young black boys as older than they really are. You know. And so it goes beyond, you know, the training of the police is absolutely necessary, but you're absolutely right, I think. It goes beyond that to the entire society.
Great, thank you.
Can you hear me? Is this on? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. All right, so my name is Daniel Shields, and I'm actually staff here at the university. I graduated with my bachelor's degree and my master's degree from here, so I just wanted to put that wall up so you wouldn't think I'm a student. This is for the student panel. And first off, I want to thank you guys for being so vocal and so outspoken with this uncomfortable conversation. But just, yeah. So just a little bit about my background. I feel like when I was a student here, I was kind of in a different category thinking about social issues, because my father is actually 74 years old right now. He was born in 1941, and one of his peers in 1955 in Chicago traveled to Mississippi and was lynched. That was Emmett Till. He went to Emmett Till's funeral. He was a peer of Emmett Till. So I learned about all of that stuff at a young age, and I feel like a lot of my peers don't have that same situation or that same understanding because I have that generational gap and maybe they don't. So coming from your perspectives, how do you think that you can get more young people interested in the movement and social justice issues in general?
I can start with that. Thanks for the question. And I think that at large, something that I've repeated for quite some time, especially to my siblings, is we need to really embrace our grandparents because inside of our generation, having that generational gap, even with our parents, our grandparents experienced this. It's a time that of rapid change that we can talk and we can sit down and we can discuss not only this kind of fictional kind of space that we read in books now, but the actual firsthand experiences of those people. But to kind of get to the question, I think that at large, it goes back to what some of our faculty have said, but it's about education. And at large, when we think about it, we as students, we came to this university to change our lives. Anyone that comes to a university comes to change their life. And I think that now that we're in a space of where we can learn and where we can adapt to the nature of the world. And unfortunately, I don't believe that we, even our generation, will be the one to see the outcome that we're looking for. But I believe that the generations after us will be. And so when it comes to how to get more people involved, I think that we need to begin to provide more spaces for our teachers, for our educators, and say that this is the time of which we need to say to our young students, look, you don't have to experience this anymore, and here's why, and here's how. And that, to me, is why Black Lives Matter is important. It creates this dogma of this time that we can look around and say that education is where these things should lie. And it's easy sitting inside of a university to say that, but it's hard when you're at work. It's hard when you're not at a space where making mistakes is okay anymore. And I think that if we really need to get behind it, it's to get behind the thought that we need to focus on our educators and our teachers, and we need to invest our resources and our time in that area, because sitting down with grandma and grandpa won't be a thing in 30 years from now. We will no longer have those firsthand experiences. We will no longer see the rapid change. Everything will be taught from a book. So that's why now I think if we are to get our student, my generation, our generation behind something as important as this, we have to really convey the message that it's not even really about us anymore. It's about the generations that follow.
Thank you. Did any other student want to respond?
Yeah, I want to respond. I think also in that same vein, those of us who work with kids or who have children have a responsibility to start these conversations a lot earlier. I feel like for me, growing up, it was like I didn't really learn about any of this until I was in high school or in college, and that's really a lot of years lost in terms of learning what the world is like for other people. And I think there's a way, we sort of live according to this narrative that we want to protect kids. We don't want to tell them these horrible things that happen in the world. And I completely understand that. But at the same time, that's not really doing anyone any justice. And in fact, it reinscribes the secretive nature of things that happen, and they're gonna find out, you know what I mean? So it's more like, I think the question becomes, how can we engage children in these conversations that are developmentally appropriate and not, that are appropriate, and how can we start talking about this when they're really young so that they grow up with these concepts of equality and other things that that they grow up understanding what these things are. It's not like, okay, you're 18, here's what's really going on in the world. I don't think that's does any justice to any of the movements or to them personally.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Allison Reicheld, and several of you guys on the student panel, which is to whom I'm directing the question, had mentioned changes that could be made at SIUE, hiring more black professors, having more black issues addressed in required courses and so forth. But I wonder, in sort of the daily conduct of a classroom, what do you think professors could do better? Specifically, what are some things that they do badly when a conversation goes off the rails, or that make race conversations harder? What do you think professors could do well or better, sort of so that we, and I am a professor, don't screw it up on a daily basis, even before the bigger changes that you guys mentioned come into play? Thank you.
I think, just to answer your question and sort of answer like maybe every department's question, I think that every faculty member needs to look at what they're doing as an individual and making sure that it's fair across the board, that there's not any bias. If you're gonna, for example, I don't know, if you're gonna round somebody else's grade up, then you need to round another person's grade up. Don't be biased in that, because that itself can look like it's a race thing, even if it may not be. Another thing that I noticed just from my experience, I work for housing. For example, I'm a desk manager. I've observed, just sort of watched my coworkers interact with black residents. It's very different, and it almost brings me to tears, sorry. The interaction that the way they interact with the black residents is 10 times different than the interaction that the white residents get. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's just, it's really hard for me to see the interaction that takes place. For example, I'll give an example to just be little things that happen, and I noticed that black residents are not treated the same as the white residents by their peers, essentially. It's not even like it's the housing staff. It's more of the people that are supposed to, almost be mentors for them, the RAs, the desk managers. They don't treat them the same, and that's not okay. Like, we need to probably train even the student workers that work with the students to not be biased. Like, you may be used to dealing with all, one race at your high school, but you have to know how to adapt to accommodate the black student too, or just be fair across the board. But that's all I want to say.
Yeah. Any other student want to respond? Okay.
Just to kind of conclude with the question, I feel like a very important place for instructors and professors to begin to start bringing up these issues in the classroom is to first be courageous in asking a question and providing your students with a question. I know this is my senior year, and for one of the first times in all 4 years, I was asked a question that really brought the entire classroom to a boiling point. And not to say that this was necessarily a good thing to see students lashing out at each other, but it was necessary to both raise a question and address an issue without the sensitivities involved. If you don't properly raise a question and have the courage to ask these things of your students, to have them engage with each other and demand certain things of each other when asking these questions, we'll never get anywhere, because like I said, I've been at this school 4 years, and in a lot of my classrooms, we may touch on the subject, but it's a lot of side skirting. And I was actually in a class with Ashley, and she mentioned it earlier in the panel, our multicultural theater class, and Kenny was in the class as well. And that was just a class in which a question was raised, and it just brought this classroom to a very serious head, but a lot of things were laid on the table, and from that rough patch, we were able to progress and move forward. So being courageous and not being sensitive about the issue is definitely a place that we can all start, and hopefully moving forward and trying to progress forward as a people and as an institution.
And I think to more answer your question directly, like being able to like hold the moments like the one we just had is really important in like classroom conversations, to like be able to sit with someone when they're when they're reacting and when they're like feeling what they're feeling is like, as a professor, that makes a huge difference because you create the space where people are allowed to respond.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. My name is LaShonda Jordan. I am a junior. I just transferred here last semester. I'm a mass communications major and a Black Studies minor. I would like to answer that professor's question as a student before I go. I believe coming in from a community college, I believe that the professors here need sensitivity training. I believe outside of what the Office of Diversion and Inclusion even offers you. I know they offer you a course or they offer you something you can take where you can click a little bubble and say, I've been trained on sensitivity and I'm diverse and I can deal with them now. But I would ask my professors to seek out some sensitivity training on your own. Learn more about what it's like for African American students. And that leads into my question, which is going to go to both panels. As an African American woman, I'm a mother, I'm a veteran, I'm a student. I think it's important in situations like this to offer a dialogue for people who don't know. But as a woman, I wake up every morning and I'm aware that I'm a Black woman. So I would like for both people on the panel to let the people in the room know about the masks that we wear. As a mother, I have to tell my children, like, Mommy, why can't we wear pajamas to school today? You don't have an option. You need to always be on point so that you can go to school and dominate. You don't have an option to sit in class, whether you're learning the same way as they're learning or not. You don't have an option. I don't have an option to come to school in pajamas or a sweat thing because I know that or sweatsuits or whatever. I know that I'm trying to set a precedence for my children. So I would like for on both panels, if you can just talk about the masks that we wear day to day, especially in systematic organizations. The military is huge for it. Higher education is huge. We are not able to just sit and be a regular student. When I come, I have to come and work that much harder than my white counterpart and may not get the same recognition. You can get a C grade and I can have a 4.0, but because you're white, because of the system that we have in place, you may get that job, whereas I may not. So my question is, what are the masks that you wear as Black people so that people can understand our day-to-day as we come here or go to our jobs in other places? Thank you.
Just briefly, when I was speaking earlier, I alluded to I said felt like I had a yoke on my back. I talked about how we have been maligned because of skin, hair, many attributes that we have. What we have to realize, the real problem that we're trying to address and find a solution to, in my opinion, is simply man's inhumanity to man. That's the sum total of it. You have this same type of hatred and anger expressed by whites on whites, Japanese on Japanese, blacks on blacks. And so you get it from white on black, and if we could, it'd be black on white. Man's inhumanity to man. What bothers me most, we're just talking about one aspect of it in this room. The problem is going to get greater. The population in the world is getting greater. We haven't even touched on the foolishness of conceal and carry, open carry, and stand your ground. Do you realize how we feel about each other as people? What we're thinking we need to do? Have you asked yourself why these people are going to stores and buying all these guns? Do you know how many layers of law enforcement we have in America already? So what are they arming themselves for? I suspect, and I don't want to be right, to shoot somebody that looks like me. That somewhere in the back of some of these people's minds, there's going to be a war in America, and they want to be armed. So I have to ask myself, would I be foolish if I don't go out and get a gun myself? Do you know that in our community, the most concealed and carries per population is right over here in Granite City, right next to us? So what's going on? Why do we feel this way towards each other, let alone black towards white or white towards black? Our country and all its actions, do you realize we're the only country that has dropped an atomic bomb on another country? And we didn't stop with one, we dropped two. You think about it. And we're everywhere trying to infest people with how we think. But we don't ever want to look at home. We're doing some horrible things right here at home that we don't want to do anything about. But still, we're trying. We can have these conversations, and hopefully they'll lead to some real actions. Because people, every time I turn the TV on and hear one of the presidential candidates, the hatred, the outright hatred, and some of the foolish statements this person makes. And then you look at folk in the crowd applauding it. So what is that telling us about an issue like this, where we're just talking about our black skin and how we should matter? Think about what type of mind has got to think like that. Thank you for your time.
Response from the student? A response from one student? Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to answer that. I think that it's a good thing that we can code switch, if you will, because I personally think I act completely different from how I was in Professor Harris's class or Professor Calley's class than how I am even currently in my mass communications classes. And I think it's good because in their classes, I got to be myself and I got to express things with people who I felt like shared the same experiences and same feelings I did. And then in these other courses, it's kind of like, true enough, they don't know me enough, but for the people in the class that do, I feel like they kind of know that it's in the back of my head, or that I have to be professional, and I enjoy it. I think that it's kind of getting me through life, and it's been working, so.
Great.
Dr. Brown, I think my colleague, Dr. Carter here, wants to respond to the young lady's question.
Okay, you can go ahead quickly.
He's cute. Thank you. I was going to wait until, because we had so many people lined up. I just want to reiterate the idea of code switching. I don't know if I think it's great, but I think it's a reality of being a minority in America, that you have to put on different faces for different things, to climb a certain ladder, to be a certain way so that people will perceive you against the stereotype. And it just brings me back to the students. I appreciate all the students' comments about what we can do as faculty. And it reminded me of how the code switching works for even young faculty. You know, if you're coming up the tenure track, if you're African American, you know, we tend to get a lot of the students coming to us to talk. And so how do I code switch on campus versus, I mean, some people I'll go, you know what, let's talk about this on the parking lot. Because it's that code switch, because I have to wear all these multiple hats, because I know the people that helped me succeed did it, and they played this kind of chess game to help me, and I know I have to play it. So I think it goes beyond just code switching or changing faces, but I think it's particularly tricky because some things I really want to discuss in class, I can't do it, but my colleague, one of my colleagues in the room, Dr. Schreiber, she can do it because, you know, she's a white woman, she has a different kind of presence, she can do it where if I do it, it's going to be Angry Black Kim. Angry Black Kim got all the black students riled up. And it's like, I don't even want to do that because I want my job. And so I think code switching is tricky because we have to also, we're playing a code while we're trying to help teach you young people how to code switch. We're also having to play the game. And so it's like, how do I survive, play the game, and teach you how to play the game at the same time, which is just a tricky dynamic. So I just want to speak to that.
Very well said. I want to hear all the questions, but I'd like to hear the questions. We may not have a chance to get answers to all of it. This just lets me know we've got to have another conference. But I want to go ahead and hear your questions. Say your question. You may not get an answer right now, but I want the audience to hear your questions. I want the panel to hear your question. And we may have a time to respond at the end, but I want to hear your question.
My name is Anthony Brown. I'm actually a first-year graduate student in sociology, but this is for both panels. How do you think the media can and what should they do to encourage more positive aspects among African Americans just in general, as opposed to just showing the negative?
Okay, great. Next question.
Okay. So I'm a counselor at the Math and Science program in East St. Louis for SIUE, and I got 2 degrees from this university. So this campus means a lot to me. So I would like to revisit the last comment made by Chief Schmull. He said, we should educate our children on how to interact with officers. But this is honestly not my white America reality. As a white child, it was not my reality to be educated of how to stay alive around police officers. And as a white mother of 2 9-year-olds, it is also not my reality to have this conversation with them until I first learned about it maybe a year ago out of the Black Lives Matter movement. It never even occurred to me, so this was not my reality. And then Tamir Rice, he was brought up by this panel, and he was referred to as the guy in the park. But honestly, he was a 12-year-old child, so let's be real. He was not a guy in the park playing with a toy gun. He was a child. And I'm very confident that my white, male, blonde-haired child would not be gunned down within the 2 seconds of the police officer opening the car. And this is just wrong, and this is why we're here today in part. So as a white majority, we, or I, need to understand the reality that exists in Black lives. And this is also why I will be strident in my work in the white community by by taking personal risks socially and professionally. Because as a white person, I still do feel like I could be jeopardized socially and professionally if I do pose these kind of questions. So my direct question for this panel was, what can SIUE do better to understand the realities of Black lives? And then I thought, well, that's not very fair to ask like our student panel. And I say that because the university owes them to have these issues addressed. I think that they have great perspectives, so are obviously an integral part of that. But so a better question, what is SIUE doing or planning to do to better understand or hear voices of our Black community? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Carl Jason, a citizen here in Edwardsville. And I come from a different perspective than most of you in the House. First of all, I'm glad we're talking about Black Lives Matter. And we need to keep that in our hearts. I come from a long generation. I was born and reared in Edwardsville. And if you know, SIU is just like a community, just like Edwardsville proper is a community. I come to organizations like this and meetings like this to keep abreast of what's going on and to see how things have developed and moved. When I was coming along, it was all black in one part of town and all white in another part of town. You could not, without difficulty, go through Glen Carbon. You could never own a house in Glen Carbon. And if a lot of you in here now from Glen Carbon, that did not always occur before 1950. So I was born and educated and went to a black school here in town, so I know about the community. But what you have to do, we can talk about meetings like this and meet. And all of you now should be ambassadors to go out and tell others here at SIU. But I was part of an organization here on the campus through our Kiwanis Club. And of course, I go to Mountain Joy Baptist Church. that we had what we called a key club. And I don't think I had any black person in that organization. And so what you have to do, young people, and especially black people, that's in Edwardsville and that's here at SIU, you have to ask yourself, what organizations can I get in that helps influence, direction, and ownership? If you're not part of a governance body, and we in Edwardsville have nobody black on anything of any significance that make any decisions that affect our lives. I don't know about you at SIU, but if you're in organizations, try to get in them, volunteer for some time. We all are pressed for time because we try to make money and work and go. But if you don't give of your time and service and rub elbows with the majority persons, it'll be difficult to effect change. We can talk about all of this here, but if you are not in positions, and I'm glad Dr. Brown and others might be in position to help move on. Now, one other thing I'd like to talk even about the faculty. You can hire all the black professors you want, but if they don't identify and communicate with you to know your position, they're the same as the majority.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And so I want you to know that. I've come from a line of administration that knows that. Same thing about the majority people who hire the blacks. Just because you may think we're a little radical or talk to the students, don't let that keep you from moving these folks into tenure positions or whatever you call it at that level. So I like to say that because once you find a few good faculty black members and they start espousing to carry the weight that's on you, like the young lady here, they sometimes get identified differently and you won't move, you'll stay in the same position a long time. So what I'm saying here is, what are the organizations you young black people are in here that can help effect change?
Okay, the next few people, please, nobody else get in line. All the comments are wonderful, and I know we have to get ready for the Martin Luther King luncheon, so I just want your question. Please give me your question, but I want to thank Mr. Jason for bringing that historical piece of East St. Louis, of Edwardsville, that where our campus sit, and bringing, so I think that was very valuable, and I thank you for that.
My question kind of had a story, like a lead-in, so, all right. I'm Charles. I'm a student government senator here. I'm a senior. I don't always tell everyone this, but one day I'd like to be a police officer. Why would I want to be a police officer, you know, with the state of the state that we're in right now? You guys see everything that's going on in the media. And the reason that I want to be a police officer one day is because I also want to be an educator. I feel as though students, starting at a young age in middle school, high school, I feel like they should have classes pertaining to police interactions, what to do, learning the law. I think that's really important. And I guess, in short, my question is to the faculty, staff, students, janitors, whoever's in here, how can you help me begin to educate our youth about how to interact with the police? I mean, I'm not a police officer yet, but I've spent a gazillion dollars here studying criminal justice. So I think I'm pretty qualified. I think I qualify. So how can you guys help me educate our youth on how to interact with the police?
Well, we have 2 police officers here, and our chief will be happy to mentor you, trust me.
Hello, my name is Isaac Jensen. My question stems from Dr. Harris's statement that she said we won because they paid attention. And I feel like we do a lot of things on campus that gain attention, but I want to go from just gaining attention to gaining a change. How will we do that?
Right, great.
Good morning. My name is Deborah Pitts. I'm a graduate of SIUE. I think I received my first degree in '75 and so on and so on. And I just have one question. I've been around a while here in this community. Is there ongoing, documented social justice training with the faculty and staff here at SIUE? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is my name is Tarsha Moore, and I am a graduate student here in the College Student Personnel Administration program. And my question is kind of piggybacking off what Daniel said, but as a 25-year-old and as educators, how can you instill hope in a generation where you might teach me right, but once I leave your classroom, no matter what I do, there's always going to be a repercussion. No matter as a black woman, as a black person in America, even if I do the right thing and I humble myself, there's still repercussions to even the most pleasant of attitudes. How can you instill hope in a generation where there is no hope for some of us black students? That's how we feel. And I think that's where it gets lost in translation.
That's great. I gotta tell you, make it a question, because this boy would preach on me.
I'm making it quick. I'm making it real quick. My name is Ricky Rush. I'm a senior here at SIU. I'm studying public relations and business. And my question is, Laquan McDonald was shot 16 times. Mike Brown was shot 6 times. And Tamara Rice was shot 2 times. Now, I'm not a hunter, but I know you can shoot a deer or anything 1 time. So my question for you police officers and stuff like that, what kind of training have you been doing to where you need the shot to kill, but you don't just shoot? I'm put it like this: if I was a police officer and the shoe was on the other foot, and I had the chance come down to it, I feel like my life is in danger to shoot a white kid, I wouldn't shoot to kill. I'd shoot him in the leg. I'd shoot him in the arm or something. I wouldn't shoot to kill, and more importantly, I wouldn't be so aggressively and shoot him 16 times, six times, not over somebody. You know, what kind of training that can be done for you all? I mean, if you haven't did training all this time, I'm like, I don't really think training is going to really, you know, come out and help now. But that's just my question. That's just a thought.
Thank you. I really want to acknowledge all the questions and all the comments and acknowledge the panel and the student and the faculty and staff and community panel. And I want to take this opportunity to recognize one of our Board of Trustees, Dr. Shirley Portwood. Please stand. Who's also a retired faculty here and a historian, so we're grateful to have her. And I want to thank the president for coming up and giving his time to hear our concerns and hear what's happening on the Black Lives Matter. I want to thank our chancellor for having the vision and having the communication with me and to put on this Black Lives Matter conference and for giving us the space and to recognize that Black lives do matter and our voice do count here at SIUE. So thank you, Steve, for all that you do and your leadership. I want to thank my staff and everybody. I want to thank all of everybody here for coming. But it's not over. But I won't get back up. I just wanted to take this moment and thank you. I want to thank the men of Omega Psi Phi for coming and being strong black men here on campus, and I expect them to continue. And also want to now bring up our student to do spoken word. I'm going to move him in this place because I want you to hear his spoken word, and then we'll have Dr. Cheeseborough come and close us out. Again, thank you very much and appreciate it, and we hope you'll come back to SIUE.
What's up? My name is Kenneth Coleman, and I thought I was a bird once.
All right, so this is an excerpt from Letter from a Birmingham Jail. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klan, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who patternistically believes he can set the timeable for another man's freedom, who lives by the mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people or goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection.
The name of this piece is Elephants in the Room. I know it sounded like I hit the blunt when I said I thought I was a bird once. What do you say to that? Another slave has remembered his wings. I broke the matrix, nigga. Negus, N-E-G-U-S, I'm a king. Usually I'm the dope dealer, but today I'm dealing moonshine and white lightning. We taking shots, assassination. As I protest my nation, this is for you white moderates. Referendum's effect, I'm out of patience. I'll demand my rights even if I have to get a burner. When you white moderates look me in the face, you'll see the ghost of Nat Turner. All these ghosts around me, y'all can have Napoleon. I'm with Toussaint L'Ouverture. My team is Tuskegee. We're the flyest. You haven't touched us like Fiji. Until you take this bottle and go full throttle. Shots, balling like I'm Kobe. I'm like the overdog. Y'all commercial and y'all marketable, but I'm over y'all. S-O to G Herbo, S-A-O, I'm O-P like Kirito. I'm epic, climactic as Oedipus, hedonistic optimist, I'm prime optimist, an optical illusionist, they're calling me boy, preposterous. My ink spill is glamorous, obscure on the canvas. I'm in a state of higher learning without the cannabis. Abstract, absurd with the glasses, got the torch above my head burning, the wheel of fate turning. I face the gunman, what is justice? Just us. Jury prosecute me in my honor, Your Honor. And I've made it with no father. Through the deserts like a llama, an odd kid. Evolved from the mud like a mudkip. Born to spit fire like a toy chick. I'm off the natural high, I call it Trico as I'm torching it. That was just my starter pack. You see, I'm banned with the hooligans. Legendary arsonists, we vandalize your common sense. We took the book of physics, then we spit on it. Rejected it. Rene Descartes the book as we drew on it with hieroglyphs. Arr! Suicide, by pawning it. I've made it to the other side and I put a crown on it. Self-promote myself to the highest peace. I reached the highest peak. And it's infinite peace. And it's infinite. They can't handle a black brother that's literate. So they'll throw some bleach in to try and discolor it. Okay. And I'm just trying to call it out like Nikki. But you Swifties keep missing the point talking about unity. But why is my success to coexist measured by conformity? I told you, I reached the highest peak, and it's infinite. They can't handle a black brother that's literate. I'm dangerous. Oh, there's elephants in the room now. Looking like a pregnant cow, a white elephant. Abortion, abortion, aborted white moderates. I've been writing letters to you clergymen. You upper echelon egotists and pseudo-intellectuals. I never thought there'd be so many stakes with my woes. Trying to keep a crab in a hole, I mean, it's hard to decipher the reality when you're surrounded by trolls. Preaching about all lives matter. You want some brownie points? You say you see no color? Where? Where? I'm black and I'm proud. I'll run it back and say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. There's elephants in the room now. And the eyes turn green with envy over pair sweet 16s. While my girlfriends from high school, Alexis and Mercedes, had to chemically alter their crowns to feel a false sense of beauty. That's cruelty. What do you know about the struggle? The ocean of oppression runs deep in the system. You only acknowledge the blatant surface of racism and ignore the subtleties that keep me a victim. To you, it's all summer sweet breeze. It's all rainbows and unicorns and summer sweet breeze. But where I'm from, the summer is cold heat. In my skin, this old world, this institution is the wilderness. But I do not fear you clergymen. My eyes are open. Awareness. There's an elephant in the room, so you'd better run, run. Taking shots to the head, red rum, red rum. Refuse to ever bite my silver tongue. There's a fire burning in my lungs. I see the world from a place where the strangest fruits are hung. So I'll protest. Don't tell me to keep it hush, hush. You think I don't know about that Raisin in the Sun? The first black production on campus. Forget your politics. I'll paint the picture vivid and blank it on the canvas and alienate you all like your new kids on campus. Cause on this campus, when it comes to spitting, I'm the silent assassin with the loudest weapons. I have the vocal cords of a dragon. When you hear my roar, it'll shiver you down to the core, like when that Moor killed his paramour called Desdemona. But I'll do it with the faintest smile like Lisa Mona. Usually I'm spitting dope, but these are shots at your corona. I'll have you so pie-eyed, you'd be seeing lines of symmetry split through your persona. And the stars would cross lovers in Verona. But wait, this isn't over. You probably fell in love with my randomness, my awkwardness. You'd probably try to put a brand on it. But wait, you're vultures, so you'd marginalize and criminalize it. There's an elephant in the room, and I just had to address it. It will bully and belittle you if you intimidate it with your talent. It even has followers that echo in his footsteps because they hate to be alone. I guess when we're all dogs, it's only right to fetch the bone. To pick at and hate on targets for no given reason. Because if you don't follow the leader, then that's treason. Oh, what a shame. You can't think for yourself, son. They all up in your ear and put the cables on you for fun. And you still go by the script in the web they have spun. You gonna let the limelight come on you like that, son? You gonna let her burn you like that, son? You're integrated. You was never appreciated. There's an elephant in the room now, so don't underestimate it. And you should think twice before you ever call me or a black professor a racist. Because we do not possess the power nor privilege, especially when we're not even allowed to pass the red lining of scrimmage. This is just a letter to appeal to you clergymen, ha ha. I'm so August Wilson. I'm so pretentious like Will Smith's son. I'm that type of nigger to wink at your daughter knowing I'll end up like Emmett Till's son. There's elephants in the room, and I'll address them before I'd ever run. I have addressed the elephants in the room. Thank you.
Smiling. Well, Dr. Brown didn't do me any favors having me follow that young man. Well, the one good thing I can do is be short, because I know we've been here a long time. I would just like to say that I think it's important, if you don't take any other lesson out of here, I think one of the things you have to understand is that one of the most terrifying things about the whole notion of violence, and from the viewpoint of African Americans versus law enforcement, is that it's so random. Often people talk about the talk, dressing the right way, acting the right way, but you cannot be good enough to destroy racism. You can't be good enough. I think about it as a child when I was 7 years old, not too long after my family moved to South Carolina. My father and I were in town, and we were going to the drugstore. And a young black man ahead of us had shoplifted. He was running out of the store. And the police officer followed him, pulled out a gun, was getting ready to shoot him. Now, he had just run past my father and I, and he pulled out a gun. He was getting ready to shoot past my father and I to try to get this guy. It just so happened that some white women came out of a store a couple of doors down, and he wouldn't shoot with white women in the line of fire. And so I don't know if he would have hit me or not. He might have been a real good shot, might have taken that guy out with one shot. But the fact of the matter is, I was a 7-year-old boy. My father had just come from a tour of Vietnam. He was in the Air Force. I mean, you know, doing everything. He was already a World War II veteran, Korean War veteran. But, you know, we could have been victims of violence at that time. And so it wasn't a question of doing the right thing, talking the right way, acting the right way. It was really a question of the attitude of that officer at the time. But the thing we have to understand, this is a point that was made earlier, that police officers reflect the values of society. And that, you know, one of the things that's really interesting is that there was a case recently of a police officer in Delaware who was convicted of pointing a gun at a man's head that he had falsely accused of illegally parking. It was caught on videotape. That police officer was convicted of attempted murder and a number of other charges, and he was sent to prison. But when it came time to sentencing, he was actually given a fairly stiff sentence because he was in jail, and in a conversation that he had with his mother was recorded, in which he said, you know, if anything, the guy pointed the gun at owes me an apology. He's just trying to get a payday. And the judge said, you know, clearly you haven't learned anything. But really what that says more than anything else is that that police officer, he felt that he was upholding standards in his behavior. Now, obviously, there's no standard saying put a gun on somebody's head when they're accused of illegally parking. But the whole point is that he was engaging in behavior that he felt would be acceptable. And so, really, when we talk about the police, we need to realize that the police reflect the values of society, and that it does no good to get mad at the police for being brutal if we don't turn around and look at the fact that, you know, in our society, in a deindustrializing society, prisons are job makers. I mean, in places like New York and Illinois, you have prisons full of black people in areas where there are no black people, because if you put a prison in southern Illinois, if you put a prison in upstate New York, then all of a sudden you have lots of jobs for white people in those communities. They can kind of tend those prisoners. Prisons make money for people who supply food for them. They make money for the people, for phone companies. Phone companies make ridiculous amounts of money with the collect charges that they charge families who accept the calls of prisoners. I mean, it's a big scam. I mean, are we willing to rearrange our society to stop looking at these black bodies as a source of revenue? I mean, obviously, Ferguson was a really egregious example of how a city pretty much could avoid raising property taxes by ticketing a lot of black people. And especially these new residents who weren't registered to vote, who were maybe transient. You ticket them and you squeeze all the money out of them. I mean, it's a way for a county with a declining tax base to survive. And so, are we willing to really challenge ourselves? It's one thing to look at a videotape of a kid being shot and saying it's a terrible thing. But are we really ready to look at a long-standing tradition that goes back to the 13th Amendment that outlaws slavery, but yet explicitly in the 13th Amendment there was an exception made for punishment of crime? Now, until we're really ready to confront these long-standing aspects of our society, these long-standing legal foundations in our society, we're not going to change anything. And so that's the challenge for all of us moving forward. And I'm really happy everybody came here today. Thanks everybody for their participation. And I, at this point, am done with what I have to say.